I know it's just so offensive. No worries, man. It's insulted me too, bro. It's insulted everyone, man. But Carl Jobs, no, that's the first time Carl's fucking. That's like borderline Vegeta, man. What am I doing? I gotta listen. I gotta listen to these videos. 1 second. I don't know. Yo, elusive. So I only did mono, so it's only the right channel. I don't know how strict the rules are, but would a right channel only be accepted? I gotta hear how it sounds like. So that's the right channel only sound. I don't know if you guys can hear that. And now this is. Oh fuck is wrong with my left channel, bro? It sounds like a fucking alien just trying to take over my computer. So I'm only gonna do a mono channel, the right ear. That's it. Alright. Alright, I fixed it. I gotta refill the water. Thanks for being here though. Alright, perfect. So elusive, you're a witness. If they give me shit for the right channel only, if I get the time, say fuck you. Not you, them.
But the idea is Italian app.
Oh, come on, man.
Called Flavio Barbiero, who wrote an article for my website suggesting that Earth crust displacement could be kicked off by a comet impact which hits the Earth a glancing blow and causes a shift of this kind taking place. But by and large, I don't argue these days that Antarctica and Earth crust displacement are the mechanism we should be looking at. I'm much more interested in the very solidly scientifically grounded Younger Dryas impact. Back in 1995, when I wrote Fingerprints of the Gods, I was searching around for many possibilities that could have caused a global cataclysm in the range of 12 to 13,000 years ago, because that's what all the astronomy pointed out, 12 to 13,000 years ago. And Hapgood's theory seemed to me a very valuable and useful one. I still won't write it off. I won't dismiss it entirely, but I've shifted in the direction of the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, simply because I'm in a constant argument with mainstream academia. And the issue to me, the most important issue to me, is the issue of a global cataclysm at the end of the Ice Age. What caused that cataclysm is a secondary issue. The cataclysm itself is the primary issue. And I found the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis a better, much more scientifically grounded explanation for that cataclysm than the notion of Earth crust displacement.
But do any archaeologists or any of these prehistorians dispute the Younger Dryas?
There's still a lot of argument around it. There's about 60 major scientists who are involved in the Comet Research Group. They're all credentialed scientists. They've all published dozens of papers in peer-reviewed journals,
Man,
including
AI,
Nature, including
man.
scientific reports.
I haven't
and
laughed
many
so
others
much.
on the hypothesis. But there's also a group of academics who are opposed to it and dispute.
I've
that
laughed
any
so much with
impact
the
ever
creation
took
of
place.
AI.
And then, even in those who do accept that the Younger Dryas was a cataclysm, some think that it may have been caused by solar activity rather than by comet impact.
How would that work?
Well, it could work at the end of the Younger Dryas. There are two moments in the Younger Dryas. The beginning is 12,800 years ago. It's a very strange moment in Earth history. This is when the world's climate, which has been warming up for a few thousand years, the Ice Age is still very much present. Big ice caps on North America, big ice caps on Northern Europe, but it's been warming up gradually. And then 12,800 years ago, two things happened at once. First, a sudden cataclysmic drop in climate. It gets incredibly cold. As cold as it was at the peak of the Ice Age more than 20,000 years ago. It gets incredibly cold, but then puzzlingly, there's a release of water into the world ocean. I say puzzlingly because when the Earth is freezing, you would not expect meltwater to be going into the world ocean. It should be staying on the ice caps. And I cite the work of Cesare Miliani and his work on the submergence of Bahamian corals. This is how do you know that sea level rose? There are certain corals that can only exist within a certain number of feet of the sea's surface.
Because they need the sunlight.
Yeah, and when they drown, that tells you the sea level has risen. And they point to a significant sea level rise 12,800 years ago at exactly the moment of this deep freeze. The comet impact hypothesis explains that because it says that the shock at the heat of the impact of large fragments of a comet on the North American and European ice caps would have been sufficient to release that freezing water into the world ocean, to cut the Gulf Stream. That's the central heating system of our planet. It's called the global meridional overturning circulation. It's these currents of warm and cold water that flow around the planet, and the Gulf Stream was cut and the Earth got extremely cold. So I think the comet impact hypothesis does best explain that. But
so just real quick, so comet hits, cuts the Gulf Stream. Cutting the Gulf Stream.
It cuts the Gulf Stream because it releases a huge quantity of meltwater from the North American ice cap almost instantaneously.
So the comet hits the ice.
Yeah.
That is in North America.
And Europe.
And Europe. That water cuts the Gulf Stream because it releases all this, which was frozen
freezing water.
Goes
into the world ocean.
Temperature plummets. But at the same time, there's much more potential water in the oceans, so that when the temperature does rise, now you have that meltwater.
Well, now we need to go on. 12,800 years ago, in the 1,000 or 1,200 years after that, that's a window when all the great Ice Age megafauna go extinct.
Megafauna are
saber-toothed tigers, woolly mammoths, mastodons, giant sloths, the whole collection of famous Ice Age megafauna. They all go extinct in that window. And clearly they didn't go extinct for no reason. It's the cataclysm of the Younger Dryas that made them extinct.
Have you seen the, what is the gentleman's name? He's a guy who I believe excavates up in Alaska for gold. Pretty sure it is, I'm forgetting what it is right now. But they're images of woolly mammoths who have had their legs completely shattered, but they're intact.
Yeah. And is this a boneyard that's been found?
Yes, yeah.
That's right. That's very, very, very interesting. I've not been there. I've not looked into it yet, so I can't speak authoritatively about it.
But it might speak to your opinion right there.
What I can say is that at Serrania de Mendoza in Colombia, there is an 8-kilometer long rock art panel dated to 12,800 years ago, which shows these megafauna. It shows many of the extinct megafauna from that period. To get back to the point, so we have this window of about 1,200 years where the Earth is very cold, the megafauna go extinct. But then 11,600 years ago, just as fast and dramatically as the Earth went cold, the Earth goes warm. You're looking at a 10-degree rise in global temperatures in a couple of hundred years. It goes in very, very, in geological terms, very rapid and very fast. And sea level rises very quickly.
And what is the cause of that?
11,600 years ago, it's called meltwater pulse 1b. There's another collapse of the ice sheets and huge amounts of water go into the world ocean. Now that could realistically be caused by a sudden burst of solar activity, which melted down those ice sheets. But that's not what I go with. I still prefer the notion that we're dealing with multiple bombardments from comet fragments. And in this case, you're looking at a comet fragment that goes into a world ocean, that sends up a huge amount of water vapor into the upper atmosphere, creates a greenhouse effect, and accounts for the warming that takes place at that time.
So two comets. One that cooled things down and one that heated things up?
Yeah.
Any idea why one would cool down and one would heat up?
Depends where the impact is. If the impact's on an ice cap and it's releasing enormous amounts of meltwater into the world ocean, you're going to make the world very cold.
Okay.
If the impact's in a world ocean and it's putting a huge amount of water vapor into the upper atmosphere, it's a greenhouse effect. And the world is going to get warmer. It's all theory. It's not fact. What is fact is the sudden warming at the end of the Younger Dryas and the sudden freezing at the beginning of the Younger Dryas.
So we're searching for explanations for that.
We're
That's what
searching
you
for
subscribe
explanations.
to.
I've picked the one I back, but I'm not claiming that I have to be right. It's what I do think is really important is recognizing this was a global cataclysm. It was sustained. It wasn't just a minute. It went on for 1,000 years plus, and it's in our backyard. It's in very relatively recent human history. We're almost at the edge of history when we go to 11,600 years ago. That's weirdly the date that Göbekli Tepe in Turkey is built, 11,600 years ago. That weirdly is the date that Plato's Timaeus and Critias gives for the submergence of Atlantis, 11,600 years ago, before our time.
So what's happening to humanity in this 1,200-year window?
I need to be clear about that. Okay, because archaeologists roll their eyes at any mention of Atlantis. If you even say the word Atlantis,
Right.
you're automatically regarded as a member of the lunatic fringe.
Okay.
And if you've even said that word, all your work, all the 30 years of work
Right.
you've done, the 1,000 dives that you've done on continental shelves all around the world, all of those can be written off simply because you said the word Atlantis.
It's flat Earth for archaeologists.
Yeah, it's flat, it's
yeah.
flat
Yeah,
Earth.
gotcha.
And they detest the use
Now
of
tell us why the Earth is flat.
Well, that's one theory I definitely don't buy into.
No. Give us the Atlantis theory.
So the story of Atlantis comes down to us from Plato. It's expressed in two dialogues, the Timaeus and the Critias.
Okay.
Plato was writing at around 300 BC.
Does that come from his uncle?
Yeah, it's arguably from a member of his family line, who was the Greek lawmaker Solon,
Solon, yeah.
who did make a famous and documented visit to Egypt around the year 600 BC.
And he was told in Egypt.
And he was at the Temple of Neith at Sais in the Delta, and there are these inscriptions on the walls. That temple no longer exists, it's a ruin in the Delta now. There are these writings on the walls, and he asks a priest, what do the writings say? And the priest spoke Greek and ancient Egyptian, and he told Solon what the writings say, that there was this great civilization, that it was destroyed in an enormous flood. Plato, or Solon, refers to it as Atlantis. Atlantis is not an ancient Egyptian word. It looks like some attempt to translate into a meaningful Greek phrase what was originally an ancient Egyptian phrase. And that ancient Egyptian phrase, I can tell you pretty much for sure, was the homeland of the primeval ones. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But the point is that then Solon asks, when did this happen? And the priests say, they're very relaxed about it. They say, 9,000 years ago. So immediately we have a date that we can put to our calendar. 600 BC, he makes the visit. 9,000 years before that, that's 9,600 BC. Give or take 23 years, that is 11,600 years ago. That's when Göbekli Tepe is built. That's when meltwater pulse 1b begins to flood the world oceans. And again, my critics will niggle away at the edges of this and say, well, meltwater pulse 1b unfolded over 300 or 400 years. If you average it out, it wasn't that much in any one year. But who says it happened at average rates? Who says there wasn't a big rise and then a smaller rise? You know, these things are very annoying. But the bottom line is 9,000 years before Solon is 9,600 BC. That's the Atlantis date. That's Göbekli Tepe's date. And then secondly, the Temple of Horus at Edfu in Upper Egypt is very important. There's been, I worked with a partial translation.
Edfu's
in Upper Egypt. It's sort of halfway to Aswan. in southern Egypt. It's kind of middle.
Aswan is the quarry, I believe, where they
Aswan's the
got a lot
quarry
of...
where they got a lot of the granite that they
Right.
brought. It's about 500 kilometers south, but Edfu's a bit further north than that. But it's also on the Nile. Now, the Temple of Horus at Edfu is a relatively recent temple, probably built around 270 BC by the Ptolemaic dynasty of ancient Egypt. These were Greeks who had overtaken ancient Egypt. But although they colonized ancient Egypt colonized their minds, and they became ancient Egyptians, more ancient Egyptian than the ancient Egyptians themselves, in many ways.
It's like when white people go to Hawaii.
All right, guys, we're going to take a break real quick because you need to upgrade your room. If you still got posters hanging up in your room, that shit looks childish, and you have to upgrade. That's where Displate comes in. Displate is a one-of-a-kind metal poster that captures your unique passions. They are sturdy, magnet-mounted, and last a lifetime. You can customize, collect, rearrange them all. Displate has both branded and artistic work. They have over 1 million designs available. They got official designs from Marvel, DC, both. That's crazy. And the NBA. So whether you want to buy a Displate for yourself or gift a Displate, they have a Floyd Mayweather. I happen to be very good friends, brothers you could even say, with a massive Floyd Mayweather fan. They also have a Guardians of the Galaxy one. That same friend loves Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I could get them a Displate. Displate is unique, easy, it's safe and magnet mounted, so it takes 20 seconds. You don't gotta drill holes in a wall and then pay for it when you move out of your apartment or make your home look bad. Magnet mounted in 20 seconds. Displate delivers its products worldwide in only 4 to 5 business days as well, so it's a perfect alternative, and really not alternative, upgrade for standard posters. To upgrade your room, go to displate.com/flagrant and use our code flagrant at checkout to get 20% off for 1 or 2 Displates. 30% off if you buy 3 or more. So the more you buy, the more you save. Go to displate.com/flagrant. Again, that's displate.com/flagrant right now. Now let's get back to the show. All right, we're going to take a break real quick because if you're drinking, you might as well drink an adult beverage that's better for you, not some can of beer filled with a bunch of bullshit ingredients you've never heard of, or some cheap-ass vodka that's going to make your hangover crazy and make your life worse. You need June Shine. They have tons of easy-to-drink, to-go, better-for-you adult beverage options. They got margaritas, vodka sodas, rum cocktails made with premium ingredients and no added sugar, unlike traditional canned cocktails that can have 20-plus grams of sugar. Again, I don't drink, but if you're going to drink something that is better for you. Got less sugar, got less carbs, not bullshit ingredients, and best of all, it doesn't give you that crazy, I just had a lot of sugar hangover. You give you a nice, light, bright buzz. June Shine can be found in over 10,000 stores across the country. It's available at all the big retailers you're already visiting for groceries and alcohol. Whole Foods, Target, Ralph's, Vaughn's, Bevlo, Kroger, all of them. We've worked out a special offer for our listeners as well, as we always do. At any store, you can buy 1 June Shine package and get the second one for only a penny. That's $12 to $20 off. Fuck that, though. The value dollar amount don't matter. You get 2 for the price of 1. I recommend trying one of their best-selling variety packs. It's a great way to try all their delicious flavors. So to do that, you go to juneshine.com/flagrant and text them a photo of your receipt, and they will Venmo you immediately. That's immediate. Venmo is right in your bank account. You don't gotta wait for a mail-in rebate you're gonna lose. None of that. Right in your bank account.
Baba Ganoush?
That easy. Juneshine.
Baba Ganoush? How about the Baba Ganoush reference?
Inscribed on the wall of that
What?
temple, not in the language of ancient Egypt as was spoken 270 BC, but
Come
in
on,
Middle
man.
Egyptian, which goes back to about 2000 BC. Carefully inscribed, and we're informed that it's
Do you
based
know
on
what Baba
Mara,
Ganoush
that
means?
A temple stood there before the Ptolemies rebuilt that
It
temple,
means
and it stood on the foundations
Baba
of an even
means
older
father,
temple. The
and
archives are
Ganoush
preserved.
means like
That's what's
generous.
inscribed on the walls. It's inscribed
It means
in
like
Middle
generous
Egyptian.
father.
It's about 2000 BC, and it speaks of, it tells the whole Atlantis
Generous
story. It just
father,
doesn't call it
Carl.
Atlantis. It speaks of a sacred island. It calls it the homeland of the primeval ones. It speaks of a great serpent that comes from the sky and splits the island in 2. It speaks of a huge flood that arises and kills off almost all the divine inhabitants, apart from a few survivors, who then travel around the world. One of the places they go to is Egypt, and they make their first business to build primeval mounds in ancient Egypt that will be the places, the locations of all future temples and pyramids. The Edfu texts are very clear. Now, I just need to make this clear because I relied on Eve Elizabeth Raymond, who was an early translator of the Edfu texts. But recently, the Edfu texts have been completely translated, every single word, into German. by a gentleman called Dieter Kurth, and they've translated it all into German. It would be nice if it were all into English because that's much more widely spoken.
What does it say in German? The
Well,
Jews
what it,
did
says,
not
what it
build
says
the
in
pyramid.
it supports everything in the original translation. There's not a single part of the original translation that's debunked by this. It supports it and it adds information that wasn't there because the reference in those Edfu texts to the destruction of the homeland of the primeval ones is 7,000 years ago, but that's in Middle Egyptian, which dates back to 2000 BC, so it goes back to 9000 BC again.
In 9000 BC is 11,000.
Yeah, it brings us to the same date. So I think that Egyptologists have been too hasty to dismiss Plato's story.
Real quick, so we can just understand what was said. The snake that comes down, like you said in the Netflix special, we can look at comets as potentially snakes.
Cosmic serpents.
So this comet that comes and hits the island of Atlantis, that's like a direct shot.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But so maybe it doesn't hit exactly the island, but it's hitting close enough where the effects of that hit are going to dramatically affect the island.
And remember, they didn't call it Atlantis. They called it the homeland of the primeval.
And what does that mean, the primeval ones?
The ancient ones lived there. That was their homeland. Whoever
created the mountains.
who then their survivors, who included 7 sages, traveled around the world seeking to rebuild their lost civilization.
And we've heard this.
And Egypt was one of the places they went to.
Okay, now, some people say the Azores Plateau might be Atlantis. Have you ever been there? And maybe we can describe really quickly where that is.
Well, it's in the Mid-Atlantic, and on the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge is interesting because there's a phenomenon called isostasy. Isostasy is the Earth's surface is a little bit fluid. If you put a heavy weight on one bit of it, it's like the end of a seesaw. It's going to force the other bit up. So in Britain, we had an ice cap on northern Scotland, but right now the Isle of Wight in the English Channel, far to the south, is sinking beneath the ocean. Why is that? Because the ice cap on northern Scotland pushed northern Scotland down and lifted up the Isle of Wight. Since the ice cap's gone, the Isle of Wight is going back underwater.
You see this in the islands off of Italy, like Capri is starting to shift and rotate a little bit.
It's isostasy that causes that.
Okay.
And isostatic rebound in this case. And there is some indication that the ice cap on North America may have had an effect on the Mid-Atlantic Ridge and may have raised it to a higher level than it was today.
Oh, so wait a minute.
But I'm not. I need to be clear. I'm not looking for Atlantis there or anywhere. I don't think there was one location. Every story and reference, and I don't think we should be looking for a genetic location for it either.
Right.
Just as it would be really hard to look for a genetic location of America today, the U.S. culture is a multicultural society. There's a multi-ethnicity society. I suspect quote-unquote Atlantis was like that. I suspect that it was all over the world, that it occupied the best real estate on Earth, the lands that are now under a few hundred feet of water caused by...
But if we knew where it was, we could at least look for...
Oh man, Toad, based on Pluto squaring...
looking for those remains on flooded continental shelves all around the world. And that's what I spent 7 years of my life doing.
Venus tomorrow? I'm gonna say no. I'm sorry, dude.
Finding again and again ruins and structures that weren't supposed to be there. I think there's the whole story of humanity that's missing.
Might just get a turbo controller.
While I'm saying that,
Why? What does turbo do? Turbo, you can quick pause faster?
Being done, marine archaeology, which isn't any longer just
Or you just run like super fast?
Period, or even from the 20th century or 19th century, but are looking
Why?
at
What's
flooded
special about turbo
continental
controller?
shelves. And it's just started. This work should have been happening for decades. It's just beginning. I think that's going to reveal a great deal. And I know it's going to reveal a great deal because I found a great deal. But I want to add that the Amazon rainforest and the Sahara Desert are also underserved by archaeology.
Oh wow, really?
We can't claim that there was no lost civilization of the Ice
You can
Age
just
when there's
pause
so much
faster on that
overlooked
controller?
at all.
Really?
Especially the Sahara Desert, right? Because there could be thousands of pyramids just covered in mountains of sand right now.
They really could.
We are finding a lot in the Amazon.
Yes.
The LiDAR in the Amazon.
The LiDAR work in the Amazon is fascinating.
Okay, I
hope to be back in the Amazon within the next few months.
Okay, I want to, while we're talking about Amazon, ayahuasca.
Yes.
Psychedelics.
I'm into this.
Okay. Do psychedelics.
Yes. And how they tie into
these myths. And
Yeah.
in ancient civilization, and potentially using the knowledge or experience gained from these psychedelic
You just hate quick
drugs
pausing.
to maybe build these huge megalithic structures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How big a role do you
I mean, if you can
think
do it fast, if you
psychedelics
can
have played in prehistory?
Well, it's one
do
of the
it
reasons why we
faster,
should never look for ourselves
totally
in the
do
past,
it
because
faster,
we've
you
had
know?
a horrific, vicious, evil thing called the war on drugs for the past 50 plus years, which is gradually going away.
I'm not good at quick pausing
You know,
yet.
but
I'm double
we're a
quick
culture
pausing
that's
yet. I don't
hated
know.
psychedelics since the time of Richard Nixon, we kind of just assumed that every culture in antiquity also hated psychedelics. No, they didn't. They were deeply involved with psychedelics. Whether you're talking about the Eleusinian mysteries in ancient Greece.
I had some really close runs
It
yesterday
was
though.
a temple, the temple of Eleusis.
With one
It
quick
stands
pause.
just outside of Athens, in Greece. What's left of it. They served up a potion to all the initiates, and the initiates included Sophocles, Pindar, Plato himself. All the great minds of ancient world went to Eleusis. They were given this brew, which was called the kykion. Then they went down into these deep chambers underneath the temple of Eleusis, and then they had extraordinary experiences, which gave them revelations about the nature of reality. They ceased.
I'm
to
praying
fear
it comes
death.
for tomorrow
They knew
though,
that they would
Toad.
not. They knew that death was not the end. They had no fear of death anymore. After they'd had this experience. It sounds a lot like a psychedelic experience, and then we have the work that's been done on that brew. And that brew was made, we're told it was made from barley, mint, and water. But what grows on barley is Claviceps paspali, which is an LSD
Wow, I'm saying.
fungus.
Love it.
Ergot, which is soluble in water. There are ergots that are very dangerous, but there are also
Who knows, my
ergot
friend?
is the class of fungus to which this belongs.
Okay.
And some of them are
Maybe.
extremely dangerous. But this one is soluble in water, is not dangerous, and is basically LSD. They were drinking LSD in the temple of Eleusis, and they were having revelations about the meaning of life, and they were creating great philosophy and brilliant ideas at the time. It's of course massively connected to this surge of intellectual activity. in ancient
No.
Greece. But
If I had shot him, it would have
Even
been
before we
over.
get to ayahuasca, what were we discussing earlier? Is the pineal gland that you
It's
see
tragic.
represented in like as the pine cone? I
the
saw
pine
when I was in the
cone, yeah.
Vatican. There's like this pine cone.
There's one at the Vatican. They're pictured in many of the Mesopotamian reliefs that show the seven sages. They're holding a pine cone to somebody's head, you know.
Yeah.
There's a suggestion that the pineal gland, it has been suggested that the pineal gland secretes dimethyltryptamine. DMT. I think that the more recent work on that suggests it probably doesn't, but that it's a locus for endogenous. All of us have DMT in our bodies. We're all illegal here.
We're all carriers.
We're all carriers. It's a natural brain hormone.
Yeah.
The exact question of where in the body it's generated, some people think it might be the lungs these days. Wherever it is, it's there.
Yeah.
And the pineal is associated with it in a number of ways, and it's associated. The pineal is the third eye. It was an eye. The pineal was an eye. It still is in some amphibians. It has a
That's
land-
why it's called the third eye.
it has
No,
a
why?
lens
What the
cornea and a
fuck?
retina.
We've just evolved out of it.
Yeah, it's gone deeper into the brain. It's no longer light sensitive, but it's still arguably the third
Do
eye.
you think shooting him in the head there would have just
So the
totally
connection of the
cleared the
pineal
way?
and
Maybe.
DMT is not absolutely clear, but there is likely some connection.
Okay, so the idea of us looking for ourselves in the past, we're looking at how people build the pyramids, and we're going, well, we have these cranes. Where are your cranes?
Where are your cranes? Yeah.
Instead of looking for the things that we are not utilizing.
Yo, what's up,
that
Moonmaker?
they
Thanks,
may
bro.
Utilize, which are psychedelic drugs, and maybe that
Thanks,
gives them
buddy.
access to. It's stupid to use the word powers because I think it kind of dismisses everything, but maybe they give them access to some sort of like otherworldly knowledge that could have helped them create.
Well,
these
it's an interesting discussion, actually. The interesting thing about psychedelics, one of the many interesting things about psychedelics, is for a start, new evidence that's emerging from scientific studies. At last, psychedelics have been taken out of the closet and are being examined for their therapeutic potential. And one of the things that it's very clear that psilocybin definitely does is
That's
it-
mushrooms.
mushrooms,
Yeah.
which is closely related to DMT. It's a kind of orally edible, orally ingestible form of DMT. They promote neuroplasticity. They cause new neurons to grow in the brain. They make us smarter. Let us pay great tribute to Terence McKenna, a brilliant thinker in this field, whose stoned ape hypothesis and whose book, The Food of the Gods, was one of the early recognitions that psychedelics may have been the trigger that took our ancestor out of millions of years of boredom and put them on the path that we recognize as modern humanity.
Yeah.
It's a perfectly reasonable thing. Also, the way that psychedelics are very helpful with depression is very interesting. And why is that the case? Depression, and I speak from experience because I've suffered myself from a long period of depression back in the early 90s. Depression is a very narrow, rigid frame of mind where you get locked into recurring patterns of thought and they're very negative, and you keep on repeating them to yourself, and you start hating yourself, and you just can't bear anything, and you're locked, and you can't escape from it. And what psychedelics seem to do is that they break that pattern. They just break it completely. And in this case, for depression, what seems to work best is a massive dose rather than microdosing. Microdosing is great as well.
You have to snap yourself out of it.
You've got to snap yourself out of it.
There's also, like, I think in depressive states, there's a narcissism wrapped into it.
Maybe so, yeah.
Not a narcissism in terms of, like, I'm the best, look at me, everything's about me, but in the negative side of that.
It's all about you still.
Yeah. And that constant negative thought. But taking and having a psychedelic experience will make you realize maybe how small you are in the grand scheme of things, or how you are intertwined into the fabric of humanity, so it can break out of that.
Ego death will disconnect you from the universe conspiring against you.
Exactly.
You're not that important.
And if you belong to a species that has been making the same kind of stone tool without any changes for more than 1 million years, two things are happening. Clearly cultural information is being passed down, and clearly you're locked in a very narrow frame. And then suddenly it changes, and our ancestors start producing this extraordinary cave art, this amazing cave art. Whether you're talking about that site Serrania de la Lindosa in Colombia, or whether you're talking about Lascaux Cave in France, the art is stunning, and it is classically psychedelic art. It is featuring geometry, patterns of swirling dots, zigzag lines. There's Serrania de la Lindosa, and there's one of the extinct Ice Age megafauna with the arrow pointing at it up there. The geometry that's in there, the swirling dots, the sort of interlinked chains that are shown out there on the left. These are all classic psychedelic visions. Very often, as people enter a deeply altered state of consciousness, it starts with geometry and patterns, and then it manifests more into entities. And those entities are often therianthropic in form, Greek therion, wild beast, anthropos, man. They're part human, part animal in form. Not something that you see every day, but something that is
very common
frequently common, very common in Egyptian art, and very, very common in deeply altered states of consciousness brought on by psychedelics, is the encounter with entities who then appear to communicate with us. And again, this is where the archaeologists roll their minds, because they like to think that consciousness is entirely local to the brain, it's all manufactured by the brain, and this is just our brain on drugs. Whereas in fact, the opposite seems to be true. The brain seems to be acting as a receiver for consciousness rather than as a manufacturer of consciousness.
And what does that mean?
Well, what it means is that we have to function in a very tough physical universe. This world. We got to know the laws of physics, even if we don't know them, as written down in scientific textbooks. We got to know that if we bump into that wall, it's going to hurt.
Oh, my friend, my friend.
The main focus is on our physical survival in this physical realm. But what's useful for that?
Did you know that there is a behind the crates N6416?
That are available to us, and psychedelics unleash.
Did you know that?
State of consciousness, from the alert problem-solving state of consciousness, and in that state of consciousness, we have these extraordinary experiences, and amongst those experiences, the most important are the encounters with entities that communicate with us. Now, we have a problem in trying to decide what is going on here.
What the fuck, how? I don't know. It just is. It's Gooses. We can pull it up. We can watch it.
In London, and another project that's going to be.
I think he said the first around the table. Around the table, baby. Around the table. What a legend. The double quick pause. Oh, that nice boost. Around the table, baby. And the boost. Nice.
Launched in Colorado,
Crazy, eh?
in Denver itself, within this year, where human volunteers, I hope to be one of them in Colorado. They turned me down.
So he does a lot of look down at the start to turn, sharper turns. It's a good idea.
There's no indication whatsoever that DMT would cause epilepsy, and I've smoked loads of DMT, and I know it doesn't cause epilepsy.
Right.
But understandably, having gone through all the legal hoops
They don't
to
want
get
to be
permission,
responsible. Yeah.
they don't want me dying in their, in their lab.
Yeah.
So they've not accepted me as a volunteer, but I'm hoping I might get accepted as a volunteer here in America. What it is
Yeah, I'm getting the
extended
angle I
release
want, I
DMT,
guess.
DMTX. DMT is normally
Like, that's a good start.
So it's just gonna keep
That's
you high
crazy.
keep you high for an hour, yeah.
instead of what is DMT, like 5 minutes, 10
10
minutes?
What?
How
Come
long
on.
does it feel when you're high for 5 minutes, 10 minutes on DMT?
Oh, when you're in the DMT space, it can feel like forever.
So an hour is
If you-
almost horrifying.
Does time not exist?
Well,
when
yes,
you're
this
in
is
this
what
space?
many of the volunteers say, is that it's an alarming prospect.
I mean, that is
to
a
be
top
in that
player.
space for an hour. They're being delivered it by drip.
Oh, that's such a
constantly
scam.
Directly into their bloodstream. They can signal at any time, I've had enough, if they're really feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah.
But by and large, most of the volunteers went through with it. I moderated a panel with four of the volunteers.
Anything interesting?
Hey, man,
There's a
I'm glad
gentleman called Andrew Gallimore, who's
you
invented
guys are
technology
here
that's going to be used in Colorado.
watching
Yes,
my
the
friends.
very interesting thing is that all appear to be meeting essentially the same entities.
Is it a gnome-looking
Machine
thing?
elf.
They might be machine elves, they might be gnomes, they might be therianthropes, but they're playful, they're tricksy, they're tricksters, and they convey knowledge. And they're also moral teachers. This is the funny thing. They make us confront our baggage.
How so?
Well, I can say...
Gooses
in
might
my
be the
case, I
only around the
recently
table, but
had an experience with the other kind of DMT. Very recently.
I don't know. There might be another.
Which is 5-MeO DMT. The DMT we're talking about is NN-DMT.
Okay.
And that is the one that most frequently produces entity encounters and the sense of telepathic communication with entities. And science is not in a position to write that off. You know, quantum physics is looking at the possibility of multiple dimensions, very open to that possibility. Maybe what's happening is that our consciousness is getting retuned by DMT to gain access to dimensions of reality that are normally close to us. We think reality is just this, but actually it's all this. And in a deeply altered state of consciousness, the need for the alert problem-solving mindset is...
See, you need some lucky
and we can
boost. This
open
isn't
up to
pace, but you
other
need
areas
a
of
door
reality.
like
Who knows
that.
what's-
I need a
what's-
door
what's
like that
going on
and
there.
lucky boost.
The issue is, are people learning something new in this state? This would touch on the
Shoot
question
it.
of whether
No.
psychedelics were helpful in energizing an ancient civilization and getting it going. I would cite the very well-known case of Kerry Mullis.
Keep his eyes open and question
polymerase
everything.
chain reaction PCR test, which has been fundamental for all DNA work subsequently. He admitted openly that he would never have made that discovery if he hadn't taken LSD.
Wow.
LSD gave him that discovery.
You said you recently had an experience with the other type
With
of DMT.
5-MeO.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was that?
It was beautiful. Okay, so 5-MeO DMT is a bit controversial because in the basic form it comes from the secretions of a particular kind of toad. And those secretions can be scraped off and smoked directly. In that case, the smoke is quite cloudy You're ingesting not only the 5-MeO DMT but other elements that are in the secretions of the toad. It's possible to have synthetic 5-MeO DMT, which is pure, which doesn't have the other elements in the secretions of the toad, and which doesn't involve killing toads. And that's the kind of 5-MeO DMT that I had, was in a pure synthetic form. I was alarmed before I did it because I've had alarming experiences on the other DMT and NDMT. Our facilitator helped me out and helped others in the group out by giving us MDMA first. We had.
You were getting it in, Graham.
We're totally getting it in. It's only the second time in my life I've ever experienced MDA.
Oh, it's great,
MDMA,
isn't it?
What a great thing!
Oh, it's amazing,
My God,
dude.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's wonderful, and you feel so just overwhelmed with love. It's just such a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So we had that 3 or 4 hours before we had the 5-MeO DMT, and then 3 at a time we lay down, and well, we first sat up to take one massive deep inhalation on the pipe, and then hold it in, and then release it, and then my wife Santa can do this and sit up. She does it with NMDMT, and she did it with the 5-MeO as well. Just sit up, and she does these mudras.
Maybe shooting guards would be the way. I don't know.
I can't be seated. I can't be standing up.
I'm gonna keep doing the workload just for
I
now.
actually pulled on an eye mask as I was lying down. And then just the only visionary element of the 5-MeO was like a feather with an eye at the end of it. But most of it was about how I need to honor and respect and love my wife. And how I...
That was the mudra she was doing, is to get you to see that.
You know, that I have to, yeah. But that I have a problem with anger. I get angry too quickly, and that anger can be very hurtful to other people, and particularly hurtful to my wife. And it showed me that, and basically said, you gotta fix this.
And how does it show it to you?
Oh.
Is it intuition, or
it was more intuition. It wasn't a scene of me shouting.
No, I don't think he says
It was
that.
recognition that that's what I do, and that it's harmful.
Maybe,
and it's harmful to
maybe
me,
like
it's
5
harmful
years
to
ago.
around
so
me.
there's a communication with the celestial being without any words at all.
Without any words, but you get it. The other thing that
But now I don't think so.
I had 3 goes.
Woke
on the
is
pipe
different now.
that day, with about an hour and a half between each one. And on the 3rd go, my intention was more selfish. My intention was that I should...
As you know.
Could it help me to get rid of my migraine headaches? Because I suffer very badly from migraines. In fact, it's a kind of curse. And I wanted to focus on that. Maybe there's some way that it could affect me. And I did feel...
Oh wow,
my
insane.
imagination, but I did feel fingers massaging the back of my head where migraines often start, and then
Really?
massaging my temple. And then abruptly
Maybe they should have
stopped
exchanged
and
my
returned to the issue of my
Canadian
relationship.
into American without a bank
And I
account
thought
and just made a
it stopped like that
buck
because
off me instead of
the-
rejecting my
the
business because I
500
don't have a
DMT
Bank of
fixed my
America
migraines.
account.
But
How about
the very
that, Bank
next
of
day,
America?
I had another massive migraine. And I think what happened was that 500
250k
DMT was
USD.
saying,
Oh,
"You can't fix
I'll
this."
make sure of that.
It was an extraordinary experience. I wouldn't recommend anybody to do it completely alone or any kind of DMT. I think it's important.
Right now, in this point in my life, in the future, I will be rich.
People in this state. Everybody responds in different ways.
Yeah.
Some people can really freak out. It's not necessarily a bad thing to freak out. It's not necessarily a bad thing to feel fear. But you want somebody around who's a sitter, who understands the medicine, and who can help you through.
Yo, what's up,
You
terrible
said
children?
earlier that it removes you
How are you,
from
man?
the problem-solving consciousness
Yes.
state.
What's up, dude? We're playing some
Because we're
Switch,
normally-
some Nintendo
we're normally
Switch, my
thinking of the
man.
next problem we have
The
to deal with.
wireless
And then
Nintendo
I think
64
oftentimes
controller, how
in
insane.
that state, we're not dealing
I'm good, dude. I'm
with
good, man.
the problems that we have internally. We're not
It's
dealing with the
truly
trauma, the
remarkable.
relationship, those things. So it's
Often we're blaming them on other people.
exactly.
Yeah.
So what's kind of interesting to me is
Thanks,
even
dude.
the way that you describe
Nice
it.
to see you, my man.
It's put a pause on those problems that we
Couple
feel like we're
Oregon
solving every
folks
second
in the
to do
stream.
kind of like self-work.
Inner work. Yeah.
I wonder what is on the other end of self
Truly
work.
remarkable.
Like I wonder when you get through a lot of those things
Thanks,
that you
buddy.
need to work on, where else they can take you. Because I don't think they go.
I'm not
"You're
very good at this
see you
level, though.
later." Maybe you start to seek some of that maybe you need
It's on his curse, I can't catch a break, energy against me.
higher
Or
consciousness.
maybe both things can happen all the time, because virtually every powerful psychedelic journey I have, and ayahuasca is certainly that, and my last ayahuasca journey was in 2019. DMT, NN-DMT more recently, and then 5-MeO DMT, they all sooner or later deal with my baggage.
Yeah.
I carry a lot of baggage.
It's a lot
Those of
easier.
us who carry less baggage tend to have a gentle
It's a lot
track
easier to
record.
get 17
It's right in my face, and you got to deal with it.
on
And you keep
Switch.
going after it.
I keep
Like
going
way
after it because it's
easier. I
very
have like
useful teaching, and I
80,
keep slipping back
17,
into
something
bad
like that.
habits.
So it's a reminder.
Yeah, and that's it's really important to recognize
On
that these
Switch.
substances are not a magic pill. It's going to fix you
I
overnight.
think people use them as that.
They're not. They're not.
I think they've become trendy in a way, and I think a lot of people are seeking out ayahuasca because they're like, hey, I have this block, and if I just do this ayahuasca, it's going to fix it for me, and then it's done.
Chances are it'll be done for a few weeks, and then you'll fall back into the old habit.
It's like a chiropractor or something.
You have to you have to carry on the work. Yeah, the real work begins after.
Yeah.
There's a recognition of what's going
It's
on,
a
what you have to
recognition.
confront, and then you have to do that work
And then you have to
after.
do
I
that
think
work.
so. I don't know. I might play that
That's
intermittently.
I mentioned
I'm
Kerry
gonna not
Lewis and the
just
polymerase
bang my head
chain
against the wall on that level.
reaction.
I don't know.
The other interesting one is Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Did I mention them?
No, but they've been.
They also were very forthright, particularly Wozniak, that the Apple computer would not have been invented without LSD.
Wow.
Seems
Francis
brutal.
Crick, who's the discoverer of the double helix form of DNA, along with other colleagues,
He
was a regular user of LSD in the
this
1960s
fucking
before
game.
it was illegal, and the 50s. And he
On Aztec Double O, it is
so
140.
he first got it.
140.
The double helix form under the influence of LSD. So these are scientific examples of people who are making a quantum leap forward in knowledge
I duped it.
as a result of their
Thanks, man.
psychedelic experiences, not as a result of their.
I got it with a
alleged
force
consciousness
mainframe
of
and
consciousness that
a
we've got
natural
inside, but as a
mainframe
result of a
bad
completely other
reaction.
state of consciousness. In my case,
I just need to piece it together, honestly.
was I was given
Yo, what was lag? What's up, man?
during 5 ayahuasca sessions in Brazil.
Thanks, buddy.
I'd never
And
written
goal?
novels
Oh, man.
before. I always write non-fiction, but
Honestly, I
still
think
write
it was
my
like
non-fiction.
139.
I was given a novel. I'm given the whole plot of the novel.
But that's what I
I
mean.
ended up writing that novel.
No.
Between
It's-
the
it's
in
like-
2007, I finished the novel in 2010.
I don't want
It's
to
called
spend
I
forever
had no idea that I had a novel
going for like a high 130 something. That's why I tried doing no body armor strats. I was doing no body armor strats for a while, but
the entire.
I think I just gotta do a
story
force
existed to you.
mainframe with body
No,
armor.
explain to me
through
how
the
it
drones.
existed, like plot, beginning, middle,
I just
end,
got
or
it. I
it
just
existed
gotta
like, yeah,
muscle it
character-
out, I think,
I saw the
honestly.
principal characters, and I saw the setting. It was 2 young women, one living in the time of the Neanderthals and one living today,
Blood
who
pudding.
were literally entangled in space and time.
Was
And
like-
it was the use of psychedelics in both times that enabled them to
Is that
be
a
in
cool kid? Oh,
communication.
GR.
And that
Okay,
they were
yeah.
brought together by an entity that they
Kozlak.
Sorry, my critics are going to go wild with this.
Just go.
They're going to drug shame me
This is good.
forever.
This is
But
good.
you know, they were.
Oh,
they were
man.
brought together by an entity, called the Blue Angel.
I mean, I think so. I would
whose-
like
whose
to, but
purpose was that there's a demon who
I don't
travels
know.
through
Okay,
time called
now
Super.
looking at the list.
And he's seeking to destroy everything that's good about humanity, and,
I don't know.
and he's doing that in 2 time frames, in the time of the Neanderthals and today. And this
Maybe
Blue Angel
Runway
brings
Agent
together
again, I might
these 2 young
try.
women in these 2 different time frames to do battle.
Just muscle that one out.
That was
I
the
don't know.
story that I was given, and that was the story that I
I
wrote.
put
You see
like
it like a movie or
35 hours into Runway
I did see
Agent.
it a bit like a movie, yeah. I saw scenes. I saw my,
pretty shite.
my young character from the Stone Age, Rhea, throwing stones very, very brilliantly at her enemies, and I saw the connection between these two.
But yeah,
these
probably
two
Aztec,
and the,
man.
and the sense of a supernatural battle of good against evil, against which the human story
Honestly,
is played out.
It's unfinished
And that
business, dude.
ultimately, we humans always have a choice. We
How
always
about
have
you,
a
Eric?
choice
How about you,
between
dude?
good and evil. It might be at a very small scale, or it might be at a very large scale. If it's at a very large scale, it can do enormous damage to human
No one is
societies.
more
At a
dank
very
than
small scale, it can
Kozlak.
do enormous damage to us and those immediately close to us. But it was that sense of that happening. Anyway, I didn't have a novel in me before that. I never tried.
Have you seen other works, not just literary works, but
How about you,
film,
Eazy-E?
music, that you've immediately connected to and thought, oh, this is inspired by hallucinogenics. This reminds me of an experience that I had. Is there, it could be a cartoon for children, but,
Avatar.
right? 100% or no? Like,
Yes.
but isn't Avatar from, what was that, the original, people say that,
Pocahontas, I think.
no. There's like a, almost like an anime thing that people thought it was.
I'm not sure, but somebody involved in that story.
Maybe Caverns Agent. Go.
Definitely experiencing
I last played that in like 2019 when Eric followed me.
With psychedelics.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Maybe Caverns Agent. I don't know.
Again, this is a mistake
I have no
that
idea.
our society has made.
I really just want probably Aztec. I don't know. To be honest with you, man.
Do conspiracy theories, but maybe it is a deliberate. Maybe it
Probably.
was a deliberate thing back when the war on drugs was declared. It's under, you know.
Well, we did a lot of research with psychedelics.
Psychedelics lead people to ask questions. They don't leave us comfortable with the prevailing order of things.
It's exciting. A lot of
Both in
stuff I want to do.
ourselves And with the way society functions, and we begin to become critical and questioning in a way that we might not have been before.
Right. Why?
And I think this was felt to be dangerous, and they were demonized with lies and complete dishonesty. But they were.
Do you
demonized.
remember when psychedelics were gaining popularity? This is what, 1960s,
When you say gaining popularity,
mainstream popularity.
well, I don't think you could call hippies, mainstream in
So
any way.
funny, the way that we look back on them, they were the mainstream.
Woodstock.
Yeah.
It was like the dominant culture, but I guess they were fringe and odd for the
They
time.
were fringe and odd, and they were
So funny.
and they were feared by those rooted and grounded in mainstream culture.
Yeah, hippie was a pejorative, right?
Yeah, it was a pejorative. He's just a hippie.
Yeah.
It was a negative term. So I guess that we're looking at a shift in human consciousness that certainly began probably in the late 50s and was well underway in the 60s. And had it been allowed to continue, it might well have transformed society in many, many ways. But then it was clamped down.
High praise is like winning the gaming Olympics. Come on, man.
About how dangerous psychedelics
Come on, dude.
I want to be very clear about that. Psychedelics are extremely serious business.
Yeah.
And this needs to be understood. I do not believe that psychedelics are for children.
Yeah,
Or
buddy.
cannabis, for that matter. I think we'd be much
Hell yeah,
better
dude.
keeping them out of the hands of children.
Nice,
if they were
man.
Totally legal, and it was accompanied by wise advice.
I was hoping Elusive was playing.
Existing,
Nice, buddy.
Psychological
Yes, they
issues.
can.
You have to
They
be
can.
really dangerous. Yeah, really careful.
If
Yeah.
somebody's suffering from schizophrenia,
He's backing that
sometimes
nat up.
could be very bad news. So
And a lot of people don't know that they have schizophrenia.
a lot of people don't,
Especially if
so,
they're-
so there is an element of danger and risk, and this is why a sitter who's deeply experienced with the substance is.
Yeah,
Sitter
man.
is your shaman,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah.
Thank you.
We haven't yet invented a word for shaman in Western culture, but we need.
Oh,
to.
really?
The word comes from Thomas
Hopefully you get
Walpole. It means one who
59
sees.
soon.
And it was then applied by anthropologists.
Are you using a
because
timer?
They found that figure, that person who played that role, was found in multiple different cultures all around the world. And they said, let's just call them all shamans.
Dug back in,
The
nice.
word comes from a specific culture. We don't have a word for that in our culture yet. Facilitator or sitter are the ones that I use. This is one of the many areas where Western culture would do well to learn from indigenous cultures that have been using psychedelics responsibly for thousands and thousands of years.
What is responsible psychedelic use to you? What do you start with? What do you do it with?
Intentions,
not-
meditation, things like that.
Yeah, it's intentions, meditations. It's not
Oh, wow,
recreational.
insane.
You're not taking it to have a party. You're taking it to make contact with the dead. Ayahuasca means the vine of the dead or the vine of souls. Iboga is the plant that enables people to see the dead. That's what these things mean. There's so much of a connection to the afterlife with them. And that's a serious inquiry. If you've lost a relative recently and you've not had closure, it can be very beneficial to have an afterlife contact with that person. And many people report this experience, and I've had the experience myself with Iboga.
Really?
Yeah, I met my dad. He
Get out.
passed away shortly before that. Now, again, the scientists could say, you were just fantasizing that, it was just your imagination. But I met
Fuck
him.
the scientists.
And
So what happened?
He came to me in the vision. It was shadowy, but he basically made me feel okay about the key issue, which was I was not with him at his deathbed. And I was haunted by that. And after that, I didn't feel haunted by it anymore. increasingly with my experiences with psychedelics over many decades now, I have no fear of death. I don't fear death. I do fear pain. I do fear humiliation. Old age, I'm 72, 73 next birthday. You know, I have to be realistic about this. I only have so long in this incarnation. As we get older, our bodies get infirm, get weaker, we become more and more I don't like being dependent on others in any way. And I detest pain. And I would like
Yeah, maybe, honestly, dude.
I'd like to avoid it as much as possible. But death, I don't fear. And I'm not
They may have, man.
anxious about it. When it comes, I regard it as the next great adventure, and I hope that's what it's going to turn out to be. But who knows? Nobody can say the definitive word on death. Yes, our bodies die, but does our consciousness die? We don't know that. Any scientist who says you're just a meat robot, there's nothing else to you but your physical body, they're stating an opinion, not a fact. So for me, it's the beginning of the next great adventure, and I think psychedelics they've helped me with this, and I know from the recent science that's being done that they are helping people who are terminal, who are anxious about death. Again, psilocybin is the one that's most generally trialed in this respect. They tend to lose the fear of death. They don't fear it.
And losing the fear of death is, I think there's a difference between a fear of death and a fear of maybe missing out on what's going on. For example, like let's say you were to do some sort of like rock climbing thing with no ropes. You would probably be afraid of dying.
Honestly,
I'd be afraid of falling, and I wouldn't. Look, I regard life as a precious gift. I am fortunate enough, and so are you, and so are all of us in this room, to have been born in a human body.
Yeah.
And to have this.
yeah, I was.
To be able to make choices between good and evil, and to live the experience of life. This is a theater of experience.
It's pretty good. They were both right, though. Flint was a little closed-minded, quite closed-minded.
Opportunities to learn and to grow and to develop, and I regard that as a gift. So I'm not into taking foolish and unnecessary physical risks. I have taken them when they're necessary. Sartha and I both nearly lost our lives more than once during our diving expeditions. We've been into war zones on our research. We've had bullets fired at us.
I don't think he was able to explain how they can, like, make the obelisks, like the unfinished obelisk, how they actually dug it out of the granite, you know what I mean?
To do that.
Flint didn't have a good explanation for that.
It's necessary risk.
He didn't really address it. They didn't really address it.
But I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Yeah,
In terms of, like, cutting the granite, you know what I mean?
Of death.
Yeah.
And I think as
They talk about moving it, but they didn't talk about cutting it.
leave loved ones, family, the beautiful things that success brings. I find myself
Which I think is, like, really
doing
important.
A stupid, frivolous activity where I could potentially lose out on all these beautiful things that I've been able to get. Exactly. No,
It's not.
So that's not the type of death.
No. I'm
Yeah,
speaking
that
to
you
you
don't
as a man whose next birthday is 73.
And you're like, one of these days,
Yeah.
it's gonna happen.
I mean, in truth, it's the door of death stands right beside us, all of us, every minute of every day.
Yeah.
It can happen at any moment.
Yeah.
Whether through an illness or an accident, you can be gone, just like that. But by and large, as you get older, it does get closer.
Yeah.
And you start to think about these things, and then inevitably, I thought, well, I don't know how long I have left. But what is clear to me is that I'm not going to hasten my death. But that if it comes, I'm not going to regard it with fear and horror.
No, this game,
as
like
alert
this
as
game,
possible,
man.
and as awake as possible, and I hope to be
It's
ushered
fucking
through
game.
the doorway of death with a psychedelic journey.
Sorry, I'll not react to that again.
Some of you guys did the tough thing during COVID, okay? You paid your people, you pulled your business through the pandemic, and now doing a tough thing could qualify you for up to $26,000 per employee at covidtaxrelief.org, okay? Government funds are available to reward companies with 2 or more employees who stayed open during COVID. This is not a loan, and you don't have to pay it back. This program is complicated, but nobody knows more about
Well said,
it than
man.
CPAs and tax experts at covidtaxrelief.org. You pay nothing up front. They do all the work and share a percentage of the cash they get you. Businesses of all types, including nonprofits and churches, can qualify, including those who took PPP loans. even if you had increases in sales. You did the tough thing for your employees during COVID, okay? Let COVIDtaxrelief.org help you get up to $26,000 per employee. Visit COVIDtaxrelief.org. That's COVIDtaxrelief.org. COVIDtaxrelief.org. Now let's get back to the show.
All right, guys, we're going to take a break real quick because you need a better wallet. Extra is the world's largest smart wallet brand for a reason. They design innovative solutions to improve the way you carry your everyday items. All of them, right here. Quick card access, look at that, bang. All my cards right there. I don't have to search for anything, it's all right there, click of a button. Also, more importantly, it has 2 key tracker features. You know what that means? It is trackable worldwide. And these wallets offer RFID protection, or as Andrew calls it, they're boot-proof. You know, when you're out in foreign countries, sometimes they don't even need to steal a wallet. They can just get the information from out of your pocket, like that boot. RFID protection, that means it's skim-proof. So if you're maybe in Greece when this episode comes out, this is the wallet that's perfect for you. And more importantly, Flagrant, as always, will hook you up. So if you check out these wallets at shop.extra.com/flagrant, you'll get up to 25% off site-wide with the code FLAGRANT. Again, that is shop.ekster.com/flagrant. You get up to 25% off with the code FLAGRANT. Now let's get back to the show.
Are you spiritual? Like, do you believe in God, or are you?
I'm not a Christian. I don't belong to any of the mainstream religions. I don't, and I haven't for a very long time. But I think that life is an enormous mystery, and that fundamentally, for want of a better word, it is a spiritual mystery. We're on a spiritual journey here. I think that the mainstream religions have narrowed that journey down into dogma and into creeds, where in most of the mainstream religions, most of the time, whether we're talking about Christianity, Judaism, or Islam, the Abrahamic faiths, the monotheistic religions, people. There are exceptions, but a lot of people are not having any direct contact with spirit. They're being taught what to think. They're being told what to think by basically a bureaucrat who happens to be a priest or a rabbi or a mullah who's saying, these are the teachings, you must adhere to these teachings. And actually, if you don't adhere to them, we're going to censor you in some way or another. To me, that's no more spiritual than doing business out on the stock exchange. It's just it's an expert telling me what to think, whereas a spiritual experience is direct contact with the quote unquote divine, which is not necessarily some old bad-tempered guy sitting up on a cloud. Far from it, as a matter of fact. That is not, in my view, that is a misrepresentation of what spirituality is. We could get into all kinds of controversial areas here.
Have you been in direct contact with a higher power through your experiences?
Yes, on psychedelics, I've particularly on ayahuasca, I have felt the presence of the entity that I call Mother Ayahuasca.
I felt the mother.
I felt the mother, and I felt her teachings, and I felt grateful.
What was that like?
In the most compelling case, she took the form of an enormous serpent who wrapped herself around my body.
Serpents always coming back to
They're always coming back. And Mother Ayahuasca often takes the form of a serpent, sometimes takes the form of a jaguar, sometimes takes, not like motor car, the puma, and sometimes takes the form of a human being.
Was there any fear?
The message was, no, I didn't feel fear. I felt enormously,
was wrapping around.
No, I felt enormously comforted. And again, I got a message that I've had many times, is that you won't be good at giving love to others if you don't love yourself. If you're constantly hating yourself. And I've gone through long periods of my life where I have felt very negative about myself. So that was a positive experience for me. I would say every experience I've had with ayahuasca has been positive, even the most challenging ones.
Yeah, what was the
terrifying.
toughest?
The toughest experience I hesitate to share this. In ayahuasca group, when you're drinking with, say, a dozen other people, there becomes an element of telepathy or communication that can take place. And it happened that I was in one group where it turned out later, we got the facts later, that was one individual who shouldn't have been there. In ayahuasca, there's a tendency for you to lower your barriers. Your heart opens. You're very vulnerable to other people. And unfortunately, and this is a phenomenon that I would warn anybody of who's drinking ayahuasca in the West today, or anywhere as a matter of fact, is that there are people who are using that vulnerability to gain psychic advantage over you. And it was the feeling, first of all, it happened to my wife, Santa, who was beside me, and then it happened to me of an individual trying to enter our heads and take control of us. And we learned more about him the following day, and it turned out he'd been there the year before and done exactly the same thing. We didn't know that at the time. He seemed to have developed some sort of psychic power. And when we questioned him about it, he said, I'm this basement shaman. I go around ayahuasca groups because I benefit from them. And what he meant by benefiting from them was basically I'm a psychic vampire. I draw people's energy.
No, why? That sucks,
So these
man.
dangers can occur, and that's where a good shaman will stop that happening.
Wait, how
What
can
did the
he- yeah.
ayahuasca do?
In this case, he did not do anything. It was most unhelpful. But I think he's learned greatly from that experience.
But how
happening.
does the ayahuasquero know that is happening?
Well, that's something where you have to tell them. And in this case, my wife Santa did tell the ayahuasquero, but he did not.
He said, this person is trying to enter my mind.
Yeah.
They're trying to take from me.
And there's a natural tendency to assume you're making that up as well.
And you're lucid in that moment. You're lucid enough to describe what's happening.
Yes, you can often be lucid during an ayahuasca journey.
You're speaking English to that person.
Yeah, you can be.
And the person who has entered the mind, is he sitting in another area? Is he hovering over
He was
you?
on a bed, not a bed, a mat on the floor, just 2 or 3 people away from us. And we were not the only people who he affected. He affected other people in that room, and there was a gentleman in that room who literally fell down the stairs from the ceremonial.
Come
space
on,
downstairs trying
man.
to get
Like,
away from
what?
him. It really got
Fuck, man.
very, very, very dark.
Did everyone confront him
I think I
afterwards?
described it in a lengthy article on my website. Yes, 2 days later he was asked to leave.
It's just so dumb.
Because he kind of said, I do this. I benefit from the energy of others.
And then what type of energy is he getting? Like, how is he benefiting?
Yeah.
In the case, I can tell you particularly in the case of my wife. My wife, Santa, and I are both the same age. She's 73 next birthday as well. But Santa looks a lot younger. I look my age.
You look
But Santa looks a lot younger, and he focused on her. He homed in on her when he asked her her age. And she told him his age, and he said, "You're that young." And that's when he focused in on her.
Come
It was
on,
like
man.
she had some energy, and she does, that was energizing her, and that was making her a fantastic grandmother and a fantastic mother and the most wonderful wife on the planet Earth. But she has that energy
And
within
he
her.
tried to absorb
He wanted that energy. He wanted that energy, and she got. No, he did not. What he did was at a certain
No,
point,
he
when
did
we were
not.
gathering to drink the brew, he put his arms on her shoulder and blew in her face, like that. Now, in Amazonian shamanism, the breath can be used for different purposes, and one of the purposes can be used for attack. They fire things called virotes, psychic darts, at another individual. Again, only people who've worked with ayahuasca will really get this, and a lot of your audience will not get this, and they'll think Hancock's a lunatic. But I'm just reporting to you what happened. Not only was she psychically damaged by this attack, but she also became physically ill after the attack.
Wow.
She developed shingles. She still has shingles as a result of that. That crop up again and again on her back in exactly the place that one of his hands touched her.
Wow.
So it's just
Okay, this is great. Hold on. So there's a physical manifestation of an emotional and spiritual experience that
Yes.
she had. So if that can happen within your body, why can it not happen within anybody else's body? Why can it not happen outside of our bodies?
Well, I think it depends. I think it depends on how much you've lowered your guard. We're all on guard, you know. We all defend ourselves psychically as well as physically. But this is the danger of the ayahuasca state, that your heart opens.
So maybe there's an argument to be made for, let's say that there was this war on drugs, right? Maybe they saw it as something that was too vulnerable to be handed out to the masses without a way to, if we're giving them the best case scenario.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't think that we want to treat the theys, whoever the people in charge is, with best case scenario. But this is a very vulnerable situation. You use people, you're seeing a perfect example of somebody using it for nefarious intent. Imagine the average person doing it on a Friday.
I spoke to a psychologist that does psychedelic therapy, and he even reported in a clinical trial these telepathic sort of revelations. That even in a clinical trial inside like an actual medical room, there was a person on, I think, high-dose ketamine or high-dose psilocybin, I can't remember, and the clinician that was observing them basically thought about their dog at home. This is a purely anecdotal example, but thinking about their dog at home, like, oh, did I go let the dog out? And then the patient that was on high-dose ketamine took the shade off, took off the headphones and said, I'm thinking of dogs or whatever, and was sharing effectively the same vision that they were thinking, even though only one of them was on high-dose psychedelic.
Okay,
It's
so here we go.
surprisingly common.
Real quick, right? How do we build the pyramids? How do you organize 20,000 people, 30,000 people to be all on the same page and deliver the blocks in the exact same ways and cut them in the exact same shapes and, well, maybe not the exact same shapes, but to certain specifications. And
You
how
end
do
up with this perfect thing that weighs 6 million tons and is almost perfectly oriented to true north and is 481 feet high, you know, and contains 2.5 million individual blocks of stone.
And the slightest tweak or the slightest miscalculation can turn the entire thing off and it won't even be able to stand
You
on
end up in a
itself.
corkscrew instead of a pyramid if you make the slightest error down at the base.
If you could find
Come
a
on,
way
man.
to, I don't want to even say manipulate, but access that sort of telepathic ability, it's just a better communication tool for a project of this size.
Yes, and let's not forget that there are other tele-abilities such as telekinesis, which are also sneered at by Western science. Because
you
we do
believe it.
everything, well, it's not so much a matter of belief. We do everything in our society through mechanical advantage. We're used to leverage, we're used to machines which do stuff, we look at cranes for building so on and so forth. It may be that there are innate human abilities that we're not, that have actually lapsed in our society, but that are still there. And this is where, again, to those who sneer at such ideas, I would say take a close look at the work of Rupert Sheldrake. Rupert Sheldrake is a scientist, and he's done a great deal of work on telepathy. For example, this may sound trivial, but dogs who know when their owners are coming home. Now, he did randomized trials where the owners would come home at very different times, and other issues like the scent and so on were excluded. They always knew when their owner was coming home. Not always, but at a statistically significant level. Telephone telepathy. We've all had that experience, I suspect, where the phone rings and you actually know who's on the other end.
How often does a woman make a part of your body rise without even touching
Yo, that's actually the most truthful thing AI has said tonight.
Oh yeah, Homo erectus. My favorite type of human.
What I would say is that in all my books, in the thousands of pages that I've written, I have probably written no more than 2 or 3 pages on these extraordinary possibilities and extraordinary abilities. But when archaeologists attack me, they say Hancock believes in levitation by the mind.
You're in a really peculiar situation because it seems like you're unbelievably passionate about a specific, I guess part of your life, right? But writing about it, even
Hey man, I'm gonna be a winner whatever happens. I'm already winning. You know what I mean?
Discredit this other thing that I've dedicated my entire fucking life to.
Because you're here.
Oh man, what a tricky situation.
It is a tricky
Fuck
We don't do
this
it to other
game.
people. All right, like we don't look at Wozniak and be like, your computers aren't good. Right?
No.
You should have just invented Apple.
That's
dude.
because there's a narrative about
All I
the
do
past
is
which
win,
archaeology tells. It's
win.
supposed to be a pretty much straight line evolutionary story.
It's much easier to digest like that. Yeah.
Through early agriculture.
I'm a
to
better
advanced
dancer than a
industrialized
singer.
societies. And the notion that there might have been a lost civilization and we might have forgotten the whole episode from the human story is very threatening to that narrative. And it's particularly threatening when it appears on a major platform like Netflix. I've always been attacked for my work since I published Fingerprints of the Gods in 1995, but the level of the attacks and the character has ramped up enormously since the Netflix series.
It's also sorry to cut you, but it's not like it's like a validation. It's like Netflix putting a stamp on this makes people go, oh, this must be true, right?
If it's on YouTube, it's like, oh, that's that guy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Whereas I try to make clear throughout the series that I'm expressing my personal views, and that I don't claim to be 100%. I'm not saying this is how it was. I'm saying this is how it could have been. There's a difference.
There's a part of this, and I want to get back to this because I'm really fascinated by this. But there's one part of the Netflix series that I actually was really excited to talk to you in person, so you could explain to me when you were talking about the difference in the color of the bedrock. I think you were in Mexico, was it?
New Mexico.
Oh, it was New Mexico.
We were at.
There was like a line that showed
that's the Younger Dryas boundary, and it was at Murray Springs, in New Mexico or Arizona. Pretty certain it's New Mexico. It was at Murray Springs. I was with one of the scientists from the Comet Research Group, Dr. Alan West. And he was showing me the Younger Dryas boundary. Well, it's about the width of a human hand, and you see it running all the way through this draw. Now, we see it at all because there was a flash flood which cut the draw down, and the sides are exposed. It was always there, but you wouldn't know it was there unless the land had been cut and opened up, as it was. And this Younger Dryas boundary contains charcoal from wildfires. And wildfires are what you expect when you have a bit of a comet airbursting up above you. It has platinum, which is very rare on planet Earth. It has iridium, which is even rarer.
Yeah.
There's the Younger Dryas boundary at Murray Springs. There it is. It contains shocked quartz, evidence of quartz that's been melted at temperatures of more than 2,000 degrees centigrade. It contains carbon microspherules. Yeah, they call it the black mat. It's not only found there, it's found all around the world. It's found in Belgium. It's found in many different sites in America. It's found as far east as Abu Huraira in Syria. This was a global event. And it wasn't one object hitting one place. Comets have a habit of breaking up into multiple fragments. Excuse me. Some may be quite small.
Based Alex
small
Jones.
They don't reach the Earth. They blow up.
Based AI Alex
The
Jones.
most recent example we've had is the Tunguska event. June 30th, 1908.
Yeah, in Russia, right?
And that was in Siberia.
Yeah.
And it was fortunately over an uninhabited area of Siberia.
No, why?
They
Like what?
calculate that object was maybe 60 to 100 meters in diameter.
Yeah.
It did not reach the Earth. It blew up in the sky. Therefore, there's no crater. But it flattened.
Yeah, dude.
2,000 there.
The
flattened
cow
2,000 square kilometers of
issue.
trees were just flattened.
Dude, if we stop eating meat,
Air?
Yes,
there's still gonna be
massive pressure releases.
2 million
It's like
cows
a
on Earth.
bomb going off in the sky. A
What do they
massive
plan to do?
pressure.
Just like
Oh,
kill
so
them
instead of
all?
the mushroom cloud going up, the mushroom cloud is pointing
You know what I mean?
at Earth. Gotcha.
If
So
happened
this like
over any
reducing
city,
eating
it would
meat,
wipe out the entire population of that
I think is
city.
completely
nothing is
debunked
grown?
for the climate
I'm not
agenda
sure. I think it's probably regrown. These areas regrown.
to reduce climate change because the cows are still gonna be alive. You're just gonna kill a billion cows
But it's interesting because it
for
was
no
30th of June,
purpose other than to
1908,
kill them
which is the peak of the meteor shower known as the Beta Taurids.
in an unsustainable way.
The Earth has a relationship with the Taurid meteor stream.
Yeah.
We pass through it twice a year, and the astronomers who are working on the Younger Dryas impact
Like,
hypothesis
have these people not even thought literally one step into the future if that were to happen? Like, just they don't even think. It's just so dumb.
The comet Enki is the best known bit of the Taurid meteor stream.
Yeah, I
It's
read
about
that.
6
That was
kilometers in
crazy.
diameter, but it's a fragment of an originally much larger, maybe 100-kilometer diameter comet that broke up into multiple pieces, and many of those pieces hit the Earth or airburst.
But I mean, even
around
if we
12,800
stopped
years
eating
ago, caused the
cows,
onset of the Younger Dryas. I'm not saying that as a fact. I'm saying that is the Younger
it would
Dryas impact
still
hypothesis.
exist. Like, it would still be. There would still be 2 fucking billion cows on
Can you
Earth.
bring up that image that you sent me about the asteroids or the comets?
They're gonna go on a mass slaughter,
Yeah.
and then we're not even
Mark,
gonna eat them
Mark sent me this
to
picture.
extinction.
I believe it was you, Mark, that sent me it.
Like,
It
it's
was-
just insanity.
These are the, oh yeah, he sent me this picture, and here are the comets that have hit Earth. And I just looked at it, and I
Puts it
thought
in
this was,
perspective, doesn't it?
but wait, and I thought this was throughout history. This is since '94.
I would say a vegan that chooses veganism
Yeah, it's like,
Dude,
it's like
for
the universe
climate
is
change
telling us to wake up.
is
Rogan
completely
said,
misinformed.
we exist in a shooting, we live in a shooting gallery.
Unless
It's a
they
matter
want
of
to
time.
kill all the
It's
cows.
absolutely a matter of time, and particular attention needs
They
to be paid
might.
to the Taurid meteor stream.
Because we're gonna,
We
we're
go
gonna
through it
pass
twice a year.
no
We
matter
go
what,
through
yeah.
it in late October, early November, and we go through it in late June, early July. and it's 30 million kilometers wide. It takes 12 plus days for the Earth to pass through it on its
So
orbit.
crazy, man.
There are large objects in it. There are many small and harmless objects in it.
Yeah.
Is that how World War III is really gonna start?
We'll do it right now.
Have an encounter.
They start
before we have an
passing away the
encounter.
cows in
Clarify,
India.
some of
Then the
those were
Indians
actually just
revolt.
asteroids that explode, I guess, in
En
the Earth's
masse.
atmosphere. So
Yeah,
it's not
but
just.
vast majority do.
Those are
Sometimes,
all, yeah.
sometimes they'll hit. Sometimes there have been recent cases of a bit of an asteroid or comet that's hit a house.
Really?
Yeah, there have been 2 recent cases this year.
Yeah, there was a woman in Alabama that was hit by a large asteroid that like left a bruise on her leg. I'm
What?
pretty sure, yeah.
They do make it to Earth sometimes.
Somebody throwing it around.
The vast majority are airbursts, but they shooting stars, you know. But they do make it to Earth. So we are in a cosmic shooting gallery, and attention needs to be paid to it, and not because we have to live in fear of gloom and doom and our planet is going to be destroyed, precisely because we have the ability and the technology now to do something about
avoid it,
this.
yeah.
If we pay attention to it, rather than paying attention to all the shit we are paying attention to, like making war on each other and investing vast quantities in weapons systems to kill one another on a scale. This is the human race has got its priorities wrong. We're still locked in a frame of mind, a state of consciousness that is not serving the human race anymore.
It's based on scarcity.
Scare, it's hatred and fear and suspicion. The media are particularly good at that, and spreading that because it gets audiences, but it's so unhelpful. You know, when we should be spreading love and confidence and hope.
So how do we allow people to experiment with mind-altering drugs without it being abused? My concern when weed became legal was that it was going to be immediately abused, and not in terms of the quantity used, the potency of it. Like the weed now, it's not even reminiscent of weed, I feel like, right? It's like this is, if we're actually trying to get to like the natural part of it.
I bought some New York edibles last night.
Ow.
Well, first of all, it's little pieces of chocolate, and each one contains 25 milligrams of THC.
Why would you need 25?
They're tiny. Well, it depends how much you use it. You know, if I use the cannabis very regularly, which I sometimes do,
Right.
and I really want to get seriously stoned, I might need 40 milligrams.
Really?
And I felt in need of more than 25 milligrams last night for various reasons. But you know, trying to slice that second piece up with a plastic knife wasn't very, and I think I just possibly had a little bit too much.
Also,
Very potent, but, you know,
apparently heat activates the THC in a different way. Is that right? Like when it's baked versus like when you smoke it?
Interesting. I mean, edibles, of course, as we know, you're looking at 5 or 6 hours. Certainly, on edibles, I peak after about 2.5 hours, and I'm still in there 2 or 3 hours later. Whereas vaped, if I'm writing, I prefer to vape cannabis because I can titrate the dose. I can keep myself just at the place I want to be without falling deep into.
Yeah, where you can't even write anymore.
Yeah, where I can't write anymore.
Yeah.
So you know, the uses. There are different uses and purposes.
So how do
for
we?
it.
But how do we do that with the
Well,
with
first of all, you legalize everything because the hasty and careless and irresponsible use of these substances is largely happening because of the illegal regime, and there are people making money out of pushing and selling these things as drugs. The first thing to do is to make them all legal. And I think but legal for adults, not legal for children. It would be much easier to explain to, you know, our teenage son or our teenage daughter that we would like him or her to hang on until they're 21, because when you're 21, you can do whatever you like, just like everything else in our society, as long as you don't do harm to others. And you know, as I often point out, we have multiple laws already which completely govern every issue of doing harm to others. What's bizarre about the war on drugs is that they govern what we may or may not experience in our own consciousness while doing no harm to others. I think it'd be much easier to explain to a teenager who's keen to get started, this is very serious matter. Take your time. The time will come. Your mind is a little immature at the moment. Wait until you're 21, and then it's your choice.
You think 21? Would it be even later, maybe?
I think because we allow so many other things to 21-year-olds, I think that would be a natural age to put on it. Of course, every individual varies. Some 18-year-olds are very mature mentally, some are not. It depends. But if we're going to put something on it, I would say 21 is a good age. The best example of why good advice works better than illegalization is tobacco. In the sense that tobacco has never been legal, it's never been illegal, it's never been a criminal offense that could put you in prison.
God, liberals are just so fucking retarded, eh?
Make you unemployable to smoke a
I
cigarette.
thought Graham Hancock was for pure legalization of everything. What he says is you have to be 21 years old. Like, what a fucking asshole.
And they believed it.
Fuck you,
And I think
Graham
we can do
Hancock.
that with psychedelics, but the whole thing is tainted by the war on drugs at the moment. And we need to get outside.
Go out.
You don't think it should be, like, off Akash's comment, you don't think it should be a little bit later when our brain is fully developed?
Yes, that's perhaps.
You have to be under 70 years
Okay,
old
I'll tell my personal story. My first
to give a
ever
shit what you're
experience with
saying, Graham
psychedelics was
Hancock. You
when I was
fucking
24
asshole.
years old. And that was in
Fucking boomer piece of
1974
shit.
at the Windsor Free Festival in just outside of London, when I split a tab of acid 3 ways with a couple of friends. I had the most amazing experience ever, but I saw one of my friends had a really bad experience, and I actually didn't go back to psychedelics until I was researching the specific book in which I write about psychedelics, which is called Supernatural. And it's recently
Piece of shit. I can guarantee he took LSD before the age of 21. I can probably, like, absolutely guarantee that.
So 2003, so I was already 53.
Wow, okay.
Between the age of 24 and the age of 53, I had no psychedelic experiences at all. I also did not consume cannabis as a young adult. I was 38 when I started cannabis.
Yeah, same, 38 actually.
And I initially found that it was something that I would have of an evening to help me get off to sleep. But when I wrote Fingerprints of the Gods, and here my critics are going to say that's why he wrote that book. When I wrote Fingerprints of the Gods, I decided to experiment with basically smoking all day, which I switched to vaping.
Interesting.
It relieves the physical boredom of sitting in that chair for hours and hours every day.
Yeah.
And I feel it helps me loosen up connections in my mind. It doesn't work the same for everybody. I don't get dreamy or dopey or lose connection. I stay focused. So I was 53 when Santha and I went down to the Amazon and had our first ayahuasca experiences in 2003. And I was
Yeah, no, I'm not going to do this now.
started to become acquainted with cannabis properly.
Yeah.
So I don't know. The problem is people are different. I think the key thing is let's stop making it illegal. Let's stop making it a crime. Let's stop shaming people because they're interested in psychedelics and ruining their lives. And then let's see what the best system we have. But this is where we need to sit at the feet of shamans in hunter-gatherer societies and learn from them how to handle these powerful experiences, which we're not. And I feel strongly, but I'm not in a position to tell other people what to do. I can only share my advice. These medicines are not for recreational purposes.
Yeah.
Not the psychedelics.
And can you speak?
MDMA now, that's a different matter.
Did you see the white supremacist that actually had like a moral revelation on a high-dose MDMA clinical trial?
Oh yeah, you couldn't believe that.
Yeah, I shared it. Basically, he was in a clinical trial to study MDMA's effects on something completely unrelated to race relations. He happened to be affiliated with white nationalist groups. He was at the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville in 2017, and had been involved throughout a long period of time. Was fired from his job after his job found out that he was affiliated with these white nationalist groups. He happened to enroll in the trial, did the study, and then as he left the study, he
Come on,
basically
man.
elected to discontinue and said,
Like,
I have to
come
go do
on.
some work, look up my name, you'll see my history, and you'll see why I have to leave. And then basically re-engaged with the researchers again to say, I was a white supremacist, and through this chemical that gave me dramatic empathy, I now understood why I was in such a hateful place, and I just needed love in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. This is
That guy's racist, though. Like, if you gotta be on Molly to like black people, bro, you are racist.
Now, obviously, not everyone has this experience, but it is interesting.
You know, human beings are filled with all kinds of prejudices and all kinds of ideas about other human beings. And I think one of the great things about psychedelics is they can shake that up. They could shake it up and get us out of these fixed patterns. But the question of legalization is complicated. I'm against bureaucracies. I'm against government.
Yeah.
I think governments are the
You
most
you
unhelpful
literally
things in
just
the world
said
today.
you need to be
Next, perhaps,
21 to
mainstream
take
religions.
psychedelics
I
grant.
think they're
Like,
causing so
like
much
this
misery and
guy,
chaos.
this
If
guy,
if
man.
you're in government, it's in your interests to maximize
Just
the
typical
negative light in
liberal.
which you put any kind of opposition. That's what politicians do, and it happens at an international level where one state
So
hates
there's
on
no
another
exchange of ideas. There's
state. No exchange of
no
ideas.
False liberal.
And,
collaboration.
you know, it would be a
Fake
thoroughly
liberal.
good idea if every leader of every country, anybody running for
And a
political
liar.
office, were required
to
have a dozen sessions of
oh,
ayahuasca.
ayahuasca.
Yeah.
That would be the prerequisite.
Yeah,
that
that's the
was.
practice. You don't apply for the job. If you haven't done this, this is the bar you
love
have to set. You have to have a dozen sessions of ayahuasca, and then you can apply.
Yeah.
Or if you just gave the alt-right and Holly, that would probably help a lot.
What is a Molly?
The
I don't-
alt-right,
Molly is
MDMA.
MDMA.
Oh, it's MDMA.
Yeah,
I didn't know
yeah.
this. It's also called ecstasy, right?
Ecstasy. Yeah. Oh man, yeah, we've had some.
Well, this experience I
Great times.
had with MDMA was my first real experience.
Okay, so when you first try it, you've never had it before. You are familiar
It's
with
not quite true. I had it once at Burning Man.
Oh, dude, you go to Burning Man?
Yeah, years
When
ago.
did you go?
Sometime in the 2000s and late, maybe 2007. Somewhere, I don't know. I don't remember exactly.
We go.
I was with Santha.
Oh, this is great.
But Santha at that time didn't want to take the MDMA.
Oh man.
And I took it, and we got into a bit of a state about it because I felt she should be in there.
Yeah,
All the wrong things I was thinking, as usual.
of course.
But I didn't thoroughly enjoy that experience. But this one that I had more recently, where Santha and I took it together before we took the 5-MeO, was just beautiful.
There's a pill called it, and it is an ecstasy pill. So it's got MDMA, but it also probably has some like coke and some other stuff in there, whatever. But
Why?
it's probably the most amazing feeling I've ever had in my life.
Yeah, dude. This job, they said that they do like cannabis destruction, and it kind of broke my heart when I heard that. Dude, they probably like burn so much cannabis from the government. They said they have government contracts and shit.
It enhanced it,
Oh god.
and
It'll be literally the world's biggest hot box.
I mean, it was several hours, but what was really interesting
Witness
about it was
destruction,
the
incineration of the
music that I was
cannabis.
listening
Come on,
to.
man.
I don't even know if this is possible what I'm going to explain, but let's just say. The music that I was listening to while I was in the state
You probably
kind of captured
incinerated
the
some
state.
cannabis.
And when I
Toad.
would listen to that music,
You probably packaged some
afterwards,
cannabis in there,
it
maybe.
would like trigger that emotional state for months. Now it stopped, but for the next
At
few
Deerhurst.
months, just hearing the music gave me a little bit of those feelings. It wasn't. It was a fraction of what those feelings actually were. And something was happening in here. It was like Pavlovian. Like I heard that we were listening. There's this great DJ Blondish that we were listening to, and all these things kind of came together.
Man, I'm gonna play for like 13 more minutes and I'm gonna sign
Why
off.
would we seek to
I'm
deny
gonna sleep.
adults the right to have these experiences? I mean, what's the
Big
sense of
interview
it?
tomorrow.
I just.
What
I
would you
just
say
don't-
worst case scenario? Like if we were making the argument for worst case scenario, what would it be?
I think that we have the worst case scenario right now when
Which is not giving them the opportunity.
yeah, not giving the
The abuse
or
of
if you take that opportunity, you're breaking a law.
Thanks,
You're
buddy.
running
Yeah.
a risk, and people got the right to break down your.
Thank you, man.
ruin your reputation. That's the worst case. We already.
Yeah, you know, I'm just putting my best foot forward. If they want me, they want
I
me.
want people to try these
If
things,
they
so
don't,
was
they
great,
don't. That's it.
obviously going with
You
these
know,
guys in
even
different
if it's
times
just
at Burning Man
that's
and, like,
fine.
having them experience this amazing, you know, I don't want to call it a festival or party.
Yeah.
Like this amazing
What? Why?
communal
Why?
experience, right? Like it was really awesome. I also know that there's somebody who's bored out of their mind in a place that has very little opportunity, and they don't know what they're going to do with their life, and they're probably taking meth out of boredom. And I don't want them to be able to take meth. I'd maybe rather them take this other stuff. So like I know worst case scenario in that regard, not in terms of what you've obviously been through and what so many other people have been through. So as much as I just want to open up the floodgates, I still want to pack them with enough, like you said earlier, information. So it just doesn't get abused.
I think the important thing to realize is the floodgates are already open. If somebody wants to have that experience, they're going to find it. They're going to find it. And chances are that the product they are sold will not.
Hey man, good luck on getting your controller tomorrow, buddy. I'm rooting for you too.
The danger of the black market with the fentanyl and everything.
What if it's only accessible through a therapeutic setting?
I'm not in favor of that, because then that empowers the so-called experts in our society to decide what we may or may not experience. And I think that this is an issue of individual sovereignty, where we should have absolute sovereign right to make decisions about our own
Sorry,
lives.
you're not traumatized enough for ayahuasca. Some guy who's not even ayahuasquero could potentially say that.
I don't want it to be that way, but I do want people who would like to experience psychedelic therapy, where therapy is offered with it, to have the opportunity to do
So maybe the question is like,
this issue of end of life and old people's homes, you know, I would like to pay tribute to Amanda Fielding, who
Why? Like what?
Who runs the Beckley Foundation near Oxford in the UK.
Just to spite them, yeah,
Amanda is
right?
now in her early 80s. She has been a vigorous advocate of psychedelics since the 1960s. She has funded a lot of the great research that's now going on in scientific labs into psychedelics. And she feels strongly that the misery and horror of old people's homes would be greatly facilitated if psychedelics were.
What the fuck else they got to do?
Yeah. You know, great, and again, being offered by experienced practitioners. The lady who facilitated the 5-MeO DMT session with MDMA that Santa and I had, she actually, her main role is to go and offer psychedelic therapy to old people, but it's having to be done under the carpet rather than above.
it's a bummer.
Have you experienced holotropic breathwork?
Yeah,
In China?
I'm very good at it. I
Do
need
it,
to
dude, you
I need to do
should.
more work. I know that it can be beneficial. I have
Again, you need a bachelor degree,
my mind keeps going off in other
which I think is whack
psychedelics work better
What
for
is
me, but
that?
perhaps I'm just
for
lazy.
teaching
Well, you put yourself
English.
into an altered state of consciousness through breathing,
Yeah.
which you can, and which reminds us that nature offers us.
But
many ways to
some
I've done something like that, and it was fucking intense.
some don't require it, and most do.
No, I didn't hallucinate, but I like started crying.
I wonder if there's other
sweating.
type of work
I was, like,
visas,
it was a weird fucking experience. I was so tired after.
or if you just apply for the
It was relatively recent.
A natural release.
It's just like, it was like a coach.
Maybe so.
job, and they like you anyways, and they hire you, even they
Anybody who's
overlook the
really
fact
interested in the whole DMT story, I highly recommend
of
work
the
of
bachelor
Rick
degree,
Strassman from the University of New Mexico.
which I think is really whack. It's
His
really
book,
dumb.
DMT, the spirit molecule. He was the first scientific researcher to work with human volunteers in DMT legally in the 1990s. And Rick is a beautiful person, and he's written a fantastic book.
And I had to get it
about that
apostilled,
experience, and he will be involved
like
also in the
stamped
project
and
that's taking
proved
place in Colorado. So highly recommend Rick Strassman.
by the government. Yo, what's up,
DMT,
Hideyoshi?
Yeah.
And a lawyer.
It's aliens.
Well, you see, this is the thing. The DMT volunteers,
What's up?
And I myself
Seems
on DMT,
fulfilling to
repeatedly
teach people stuff.
experienced
Yeah.
encounters with what might
Thanks, man. Yeah, that does.
because again, I'm having
Especially-
to stick to my opponents to beat me with. And so
Fucking-
I would like to point out, and I went into this in depth in my book.
To give them like a chance to go international, to be legends.
That the experiences that shamans have with spirits, the experiences that people in the Middle Ages up until about the 1950s had with fairies and elves, and the experiences that people have with
Oh, it'll be an amazing
aliens
experience.
today, they're all the same experience, construed through different cultural lenses. The details of the experience in every case are almost identical. Once you get down to the phenomenology,
I've been improving at playing the guitar too. Now I can like read the chords and just like play a song that I've never learned before. Still kind of some breaks, some notes I don't know, but
well, certainly they are alien to this realm. But
I've improved a lot.
Spaceships, or are they crossing interdimensional space, or are they all within our minds somehow?
Mark, the guy that you spoke to, did you put that episode out yet? Yes.
With Rick Barnett, yeah.
Yeah. So Mark spoke to a guy who claims to have been abducted
Oh, that guy. Yeah.
by aliens,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Jay King.
yeah, has he dabbled with psychedelics at all?
I don't know. I asked him sort of like
Peripherally?
yeah, peripherally, and he didn't really seem to He didn't elect that information outright. I didn't press on
He
that.
may be a natural overproducer of DMT. It's notable that people in the Middle Ages were repeatedly reported being abducted by fairies. Shamans are repeatedly abducted by spirits. Shamans have sex with female spirits in the spirit world. Alien abductees
Yeah, I'm gonna play for like
today
7 more minutes.
have sex with aliens and often produce hybrid children. It was the case with fairies as well. It was the same thing. We're just viewing it through different cultural lenses, I think. And I think it's very useful to analyze this experience if you look at these earlier examples of how it was construed.
And there were like ancient civilizations that spoke of the
Why?
star people, or
It's
like, is
fucking
that
dumb.
a version of
There's
that?
a fascinating imagery on the second shrine of the tomb of Tutankhamun, which is in the museum in Cairo now. And what it is, it's a gold. The whole shrine is covered in gold, and on one side of it is an image of individuals who are in mummified form, but they're looking up at a star, and rays from the star are coming down into their forehead, right into their forehead. And talk about star people, and talk about the pineal gland. I mean, that's what it seems like. Let's see if we can find
Any
it.
of these, perhaps?
That's actually from the second shrine, but that's not the image I'm talking about. That may be the image. Let's have a look at that. Yeah.
I have no idea where my phone is.
It's not very high quality.
No, that's not it anyway. But anybody who searches far enough and spends enough time will find it. It's a very famous image, and there's this direct connection with the stars that is manifested in that image.
So as far as global knowledge is concerned, all these ancient cultures building pyramids, building different mound structures connected to the stars in some capacity. I know it's been posited that there's ancient civilization that's potentially going around. Is it
Oh, I think
possible that it's just
where is my
connection with
phone?
psychedelics that occur naturally all over the earth, and even internally with us through holotropic breathing that could give those revelations?
My view on a possible lost human civilization is, first of all, that civilization, like all other civilizations on Earth, emerged out of shamanism. And that psychedelics and the use of consciousness-altering plants and fungi were fundamental to that shamanistic culture, just as they were to every other shamanistic culture. But it took a different direction from some other ones, and became capable of navigating and exploring the Earth at a very, very early date, and studied astronomy in an almost scientific sense.
Do you think it's possible that this same experience happened to what are we, Homo sapien?
We're Homo sapiens, yeah.
Did it happen to, what were you bringing up earlier?
Homo erectus,
Homo erectus, Neanderthals. Could they have also dabbled?
I think it certainly happened with Neanderthals. There's more and more evidence that cave art that was attributed to Homo sapiens was actually done by Neanderthals.
Wow.
And it may be that the Neanderthals taught the ancestors of anatomically modern humans how to paint. That is even possible. There's very strong evidence now that Neanderthals were doing cave art, and the same geometric patterns and the same entities appeared there. They're not so different from anatomically modern humans, and anyway they live on in us because there's so much Neanderthal DNA up to these may be some examples of Neanderthal cave art.
But did Homo erectus, I think you mentioned that they were sailing?
Well, they certainly did sail, because they got, as far as I recall, even as far away as some of the Pacific islands, Micronesia, maybe even New Guinea. But the problem is we don't have any evidence from that period, apart from a few skeletal and fossil remains. The evidence for psychedelic use in cave art is fundamentally derives from the art itself.
Yeah.
That was why I went to the Amazon to drink ayahuasca in 2003. I thought I had finished my inquiry into the possibility of a lost civilization. I was wrong. I went back to it later because new evidence, particularly Göbekli Tepe, came out. I was looking for a new subject that really interested me. Human origins interested me. And then this sort of burst of symbolism and creativity that occurs 100,000 years ago or less. And that's when I started to look at cave art. And then I came across the work of a professor at the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa, David Lewis Williams. His neuropsychological model of cave art suggested that cave art was documenting experiences in deeply altered states of consciousness. And he made a strong case for that. Then I thought, okay, let's look at cultures that are using deeply altered states of consciousness now. So I started looking at the Amazon, and I came across an amazing book written by Luis Eduardo Luna, with paintings by Pablo Amaringo, an Amazonian shaman, depicting his ayahuasca visions, and lo and behold, there were so many common points with the
not
cave
it.
art. I'm a boots on the ground researcher. I can't write a book about something if I don't experience it. That's why I spent 7 years scuba diving. So, you know, I said to Santa, we have to go to the Amazon and drink ayahuasca if I'm going to write this book authentically.
Does cave art make more sense to you now after having the...
Oh, completely, yeah. Yeah, it makes complete sense to me.
I
Certainly
love
wasn't
homosexual
hunting
people
magic. They weren't trying to cast magical spells on the animals that they wanted to hunt.
in a
Only about
platonic
2%
way.
of all animals shown in cave art are pierced by any kind of projectile, as a matter of fact. There's no evidence that they were eating the animals that are depicted in the cave art. A lot of animals are depicted, but shamans often experience themselves transforming into animals. Spirit animals, you know. So it all makes much more sense to me, and the geometry that accompanies it, and the scintillating patterns. It's all psychedelic art, in my view.
Is it odd to have had these experiences and speak to people who haven't? Because as I talk to you right now, I feel like you've existed. It's not another country. I feel like you've existed in
Not
like
it.
a different
Dimension?
or
Reality.
like the Spider-Verse, like a different like as part of the multiverse. That's kind of what it feels like. And
Yeah.
you've existed in both, and you can relate to me on the
That's
things
not
I'm
it.
saying because you know what it's like.
Yeah.
But the things you're describing to me, I can't even really wrap my head around them.
Go drink some ayahuasca.
It makes me
Oh wow,
wanna do it.
insane.
Yeah, I'm
Go
down.
drink some ayahuasca in a properly controlled shamanic setting, where the shamans know what
You
they're.
gotta give me the name of that fucking vampire before I go do it. Read it, right? That's terrible.
He's on everybody's watch list now.
Good.
Yeah, he won't be going, but there are some good places, and I'm not saying that there aren't good places available in the West as well. There may
But is that a common experience you've had with people? Like, I'm fascinated by what you're describing, but it is so foreign.
Yeah, it's very difficult for those who've not had the experience to relate to it. For those who have had the experience, it's very easy to relate to it. So I'm kind of bridging two worlds. I'm trying to use my functionality in this realm as a storyteller, as a person of words, to bring across some element of that experience, and fundamentally to say to people, we shouldn't demonize this. We should consider that it's played a huge role in the human story.
Has it
Oh, wow,
dulled
insane,
your
Toad.
experience within this reality that we share it all, knowing that there's this alternative version?
It seems more precious.
So it's enhanced it.
Enhanced it.
That's good.
I feel incredibly fortunate to have had this incarnation, to still be in this incarnation.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, that's another thing which I can't prove, but I do think reincarnation makes a lot of sense.
Why is that?
Well, firstly because of firstly because of Ian Stevenson's amazing study called "Children Who Remember Past Lives." Ian Stevenson was a psychologist, and he was interested in reincarnation, and he went to India. Our culture discourages children from remembering past lives. In India, they don't. And he went to India and he interviewed children in India up to the age of 7. After the age of 7, it's all forgotten. Tends to be all forgotten. We get so absorbed in this life. But up to the age of 7, there are distinct past life memories. And this appears
Oh,
to be
wow,
true of all
insane,
children.
George.
It's just that some cultures allow those memories to be manifest and others don't. And he did scientific work. So an example might be a child who remembered his name, living in a village 300 or 400 miles away from where he's living now. He remembered the house that he lived in. He remembered an object that he'd concealed in that house in that past life. Then they would go to the house, they would find the object, they would know that there was a
There's some
person.
crazy stories I've heard.
Now this is proper work. This is not woo-woo. This is again recommending a book, Ian Stevenson, Children Who Remember Past Lives.
How stupid do you feel?
Wait, what?
Catholic.
And that's another reason why is it transhumanism that seeks to make us immortal in our physical bodies? Is that what it is?
Yeah, the singularity.
I'm not a big fan of that. I like the idea of the deck being reshuffled and coming back and having multiple lives rather than being stuck in this one forever.
Speaking of religion, I've actually been wondering, how do religious people take your theories?
Badly.
Because here's what's
The
interesting.
only thing that
Oh yeah, AI lies a lot.
brings
AI
about
makes up
is
literally.
the
AI
story of
makes
the
up
flow.
everything.
story of the flood is very
Everything's a
important
lie.
for my work, and of course it's found in the Old Testament, and it's found
And
in
it says it so
Islam, and
matter of
it's found in
factly.
Judaism as well.
Well, here's this
And it's found in
interesting
many
to
other
me.
religions.
And all jokes aside, I've actually been kind of like questioning my faith recently, and I was thinking this would actually make it way easier, because one thing I'm struggling with is the Earth is billions of years old. Humans that have existed for what, 100,000 years? It's such a blip
Anatomically
on the
modern
radar.
humans about 300,000 years.
It's 300,000 out of billions. But
Out
if
of
you
billions,
told me there's a reality in which, or a history in which humans are here, and then a cataclysm happens because God's not happy with them, and then we restart, and then the same thing happens over and over again throughout history. As a religious person, I'm like, oh, that can explain away me being like, if God made all this for humans, why are we here such a small time in the Earth's history?
It can help, and you know, whether the realm we live in is created or has developed accidentally, the absence of certainty about everything is an important part of the human experience. But if we were all certain, absolutely scientifically certain that death was the end and there's nothing beyond it, which we can't be, then we would have a particular attitude to death. If we were all certain that reincarnation occurs, then we would also we might not take this life so seriously. We might have a flippant attitude towards it. Well, I'm going to come back. You know? Whereas the lessons that this life has to teach are lessons that are based on the uncertainty of everything. We don't know what death is. We don't know what consciousness is. These are all mysteries. Right. We must make our choices against that background of mystery, and decide what we're going to do with the gift of life that we have, however it came our way. So the Greeks believed in reincarnation, and their view was that we drink of the waters of forgetfulness.
Like what? Like come on, man.
And that's part of the deal, that we should forget the past life. And in Buddhism, the only individuals who come back with full memory are the bodhisattvas. They are those who have been through life's multiple incarnations. They've learned all the lessons that life has to teach us. They've achieved nirvana, but they choose not to do that. They choose to come back to the earth plane to teach others, to be guides to others, and they remember all their past lives. There are many different religions have different views on these things. It's only the Abrahamic faiths that are convinced that we just have this one life, and you know, we've got to heaven or hell depending on what we do.
Graham Hancock, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. This is awesome. This is so good. Dude.
Thanks for having
Wow, we
me.
watched all of it again. Wow.
Thank you so much.
I really appreciate it.
In October
24th.
October 24th is the date. Yeah.
Check out all the books. Check out your website. I'm sure that all the information is located there.
GrahamHancock.com.
We'll post it in the
everything is
description
there.
and everything.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank
That
you.
was excellent.
Thank you. It's
That
been
was
great
so
fun.
good.
Thank you.
I might play another 5 or 10 more minutes.
Everything you know about ancient history is wrong.
The Egyptian pyramids at Giza are undoubtedly one of the most, if not the weirdest structures on Earth. They are full of secrets that have not been exposed.
Who built these incredible structures? Was it really the ancient Egyptians?
What's the speculation? There are realms of science that sit outside of our understanding. We'll know more tomorrow, in 10 years, in 1,000 years about science.
There is evidence of techniques and tools that we use that simply do not match the things that we find in the archaeological record.
It goes so much further than the pyramids to me. We're looking at the remnants of a lost civilization.
We say they're tombs, and Google might say they're tombs, but there's very, very little evidence that they're tombs. Almost none.
Everything you know about
Yo! Thanks, Ninja. Thanks, buddy. What up, man? What up, dude?
and we've got a roadie from Metallica here.
Ninja lifestyle legend. Everyone go follow Ninja.
As the athletes would say, we've left it all in the field.
Thanks, bro.
I'm so excited. I've been talking to you. We don't have to come and say, we'll never say in here. A month when we're sitting in Florida, we're not going to be looking at each other and saying, you know, if we only worked a little bit harder, you can't work harder. I will always fight for you. I will be watching, I will be listening, and I will tell you that the future of this country has never been better. With the pyramids.
Yo, Ninja, thanks, bro. Fucking legend, man. Thanks, buddy.
They've heard people
Fuck,
say,
dude.
aliens built them, etc. Can you just break down why the pyramids are so amazing outside of
Yeah, he's doing
the
LTK, I guess, License to Kill.
Well, yeah, I mean, the reality of them is probably stranger and more interesting than anything people can think up in terms of fiction. It's just they're for the longest time have been not only like the tallest man-made structure, but they've been some of the most precisely man-made structures we've ever accomplished. Like we didn't, wasn't until like the 1700s that we even developed enough precision to be able to define just how accurately those things are aligned to things like true north. We're still discovering crazy coincidences about them in terms of, you know, they're encoding these fundamentals of nature.
Some unknown N64 kid footage, some new footage, some new old footage.
What do you mean by that?
Well,
Let's break down some of
Yeah, but I'm playing on the Nintendo Switch. So I'm going for the second Bunker 116 on Switch.
A whole lot of studying on the other pyramids. It's something that's
It's pain in the ass.
In fact, we've not even cleared off the bases of some of the
Thanks,
other
bro.
pyramids up at Giza.
Fucking legend.
It's crazy. We still to this day haven't done that. But that pyramid itself, the Great Pyramid, the one that we all know and look at, the biggest one, it's aligned to true north within just, you know, a fraction of a degree off. I mean, we just don't build with that type of precision even today. In fact, the only building we made that was that precise was like an observatory in France. That was the first one we ever made that even came close to that degree of precision. They made that in the 1800s. That's just one aspect of it, though. It's insane. Apart from it being just the tallest building for forever until the Eiffel Tower was built.
But actually, I'm going to stop playing in like a little bit.
Were built, what, 4,500 years ago?
Something like that, somewhere around the 2500 BC realm.
So they build this in 2500 BC, and then it takes us until 1800 AD in order to build something taller.
Yeah,
just taller, not even as precise.
Yeah, nowhere near as precise.
4,000 years later, 4,500 years later, whatever it is.
So you can understand why people start to question the historical narrative.
Well, it falls apart under any rudimentary examination, just the logistics of trying to build that thing alone. So you have to, the way that there's very little evidence that actually ties it to the guy they say who built it. It's a guy named Khufu, who's like a pharaoh of the 4th dynasty, Old Kingdom. And they have to try and tie it to, well, because the whole story is like it's a tomb for him. So, you know, when he came to power, he probably said, we're going to build this thing as my tomb. So they had to get it done inside of his reign.
Right.
So that sort of pins it to like, well, 20 to 25 years.
Okay.
So you can break it down from there. And say, well, it weighs like 5 million tons. And no kidding. And it's like it's made up of around somewhere between 2 and 2.5 million blocks of stone weighing, you know, any of it like 2-3 tons. Some of the big granite blocks on the inside weigh like 70-80 tons. It's insane.
And these blocks are coming from quarries that are...
Some of them, yeah. The granite came from quarries that are like 1,000 kilometers away to the south. They had to be shipped up. A lot of the limestone, so it's made up of granite in the inside. The outside is 2 types of limestone. The core masonry is this limestone. A lot of it did come from Giza, not all of it. There's actually nowhere near enough quarrying to make up for all of it. The Cairo area, and then the outside casing stone is something called Tura limestone. It's a very fine white version of limestone that came from a fair distance away. But you can break it down from there. So if you go, well, it's 25 years, 2.5 million blocks of stone, it basically means for 25 years, you have to be putting 1 block of stone in place, finished, shipped, carved, quarried, put in place every 5 minutes, every day for 25 years.
24/7, non-stop.
24/7, non-stop. And now that
no union hours.
No union hours. Yeah.
Overtime.
Yeah, no breaks, no whatever it is. I mean, it's crazy. And that is only the pyramid. And you've got to remember also, pyramids are part of a complex. There's
2 other...
Alright, I think I'm gonna raid somebody.
There's a bunch, there was like 9 or 10 there originally. But there's just that one pyramid. It's not just when you build these pyramids that they're part of a complex, not the
interesting
other pyramids,
test.
but they have a causeway. They have
Thank you for running that test.
A temple or ceremonial, but there's temples. There's years of work just in preparing the ground, the whole foundation of what's around the pyramid. I love going to Egypt and showing people. Everyone stands there and they look up at the pyramids. I'm like, look down at your feet. Look at what you're standing on. There's these massive floor tiles that have been put into the ground. Some of these things weigh up to like 200 tons. And they're fit together like a geometric puzzle and done so precisely you can't stick a razor blade in between the gaps.
I didn't know that.
Oh, it's
pick
insane.
up on that at all. So you're saying that they dug down and then created a flat surface,
a foundation,
and then tiled the foundation.
Yeah, with these, but some of these, I mean, you're talking tiles this thick, some of them even bigger. In fact, the middle pyramid is even more impressive in that regard. because it's built into a side of a hill. Like it's literally a sloping hill, so they dug down on this side.
You
they raised it
dingus!
up
Come
this side,
on,
and made this
man.
flat platform
You
for it.
dingus.
And it's just astonishing engineering. So you got to factor in, and of course these types of projects you don't need to make it up
Dingus.
as you go along, right? So how long does it take to design it, plan it, put the plan is that's years. Doing the foundation work, that's probably years.
You have to make sure there's
You
enough
dingus!
stone
Come on,
to even
man.
achieve it.
Just logistics is this massive problem. I actually would love to do the exercise of working backwards, because we've done some experiments on things like, okay, using really primitive methods, which is what, you know, the mainstream guys say they used. It takes this long to cut stone. And we've done a few little experiments here and there.
Alright, I'm gonna raid somebody after this run.
How many cuts of stone do we need? How long would that have taken? How long is it going to take to ship this ship?
That's right. You can see based on, what is it, axe and chisel or whatever it is?
Yeah, chisels. Like, so, well, this is the thing.
Hammer and chisel?
The stupidest thing about it all is you see these wonders of ancient Egypt. The
Alright, one more
pyramids,
run.
these giant granite single-piece statues and columns, and they tell you that it was all made with round balls of stone and flint chisels, just like repeatedly bashing on them.
So let's
or
assume
like grinding
it was.
on them with sand.
But let's assume it was. You could calculate. No. But even if we were to, like, you could calculate how long it would take to take that round stone and the chisel and chip away and create these perfectly. They're not even symmetrical, but like these perfectly shaped, you know,
Which
blocks.
you wouldn't even be able to get them perfectly symmetrical, but even as close as
you
close
could
as you
calculate
could.
how long it would take.
Yeah.
And have you tried to do that math?
No, but it's on my list of things to do. In particular, I'm interested in like the granite as well, because
Because the granite's so hard to cut.
Granite's so hard. There's a few things involved in the granite. It's you know, they say, well, they grinded on it with sand, and like they get a copper bar, and we've done these experiments. It's much harder. Like that's the other thing that people try to compare, like the work of the Romans and a lot of times the Greeks. They all worked in marble. Like, this is a very, very soft stone relative to granite. Like, frankly, granite's a
Alright, this is the last run. This is not it, but this is the last
it's
run.
harder than steel. It's like a 6.57 on the Mohs scale. You know, diamonds at a 10, your fingernails at a 2, copper's at 3, bronze is a 4, steel's like a 5 and a 6.
What is marble, out of curiosity?
Marble's like, I think it's like a 3-ish.
So this is theoretically twice as hard.
Yeah, it's just a super soft.
I mean,
super hard.
you had mentioned
Wait.
molecular manipulation.
Yeah, so that's the speculation realm, but it does to me, and this, you can see a bit more of that, I think. You go like South America, because a lot of the real megalithic stuff in places like Peru.
Thank you very much for being here, my friends.
A megalith is just a giant stone.
Giant stone walls. Yeah, I call stuff that's
where's my
megalithic is,
phone?
I
I
would
can't use it to
define it as like,
read. Oh my God,
walls and
whatever.
structures made up of massive single pieces of stone.
Yeah.
Typically showing signs of precision in how they're built and
I don't even know who's
alignment. Like,
online.
making these sort of mortarless walls is not easy. Like we don't do that today. Like this is what, you know, mortar.
So I think this is one of the cool things that you've exposed and a lot of your contemporaries have exposed is that ancient history isn't studied by it is architects. Do you know what I mean? And engineers, right? Like so they're applying these
Sailor
ideas and
curves.
principles to the information that they
Oh,
have,
man.
but they don't know what the fucking
just
Mohs
donated
scale
with
is.
some
So
bits
they're finding
still.
some tools and they're seeing some locks and they're going, okay, this is how they probably chopped up the
Oh,
wood.
no, we're gonna read
Engineering is limitless. You can do whatever, whereas an
Exactly.
engineer would be like, no, you can't.
Well, an engineer shows up and then it looks at the granite and goes, wait, they did what with the granite?
Yeah.
Or
Look,
the-
it's the engineers that
sailor
come along,
curves
and
we
in a
got
lot of
it.
cases, the whole, like, all of the problems that come up with that orthodox story when it comes to engineering topics, that's been raised by engineers. It's a strange thing to me. It's like you wouldn't ask an archaeologist to design the chair that he's sitting on, right?
Yeah.
But if it's an ancient chair, he's going to claim domain over it and dominion over it and say, I'm the expert, I don't care what you say.
Yeah.
So a lot of that happens. And that's not to say they haven't tried to make studies into it. And that's part of my work. I dive into these studies and kind of tear them apart because they're ultimately really silly. And when you go to Egypt, you take engineers, construction experts, architects, people look at it and they just see it immediately and go, this is nonsense.
Yeah.
Like, you know, this isn't the work of a primitive civilization or a Bronze Age civilization with simple tools. And then, you come back to the pyramid and when you start to realize, like, there's so much more involved in this. There's evidence of this, of the people that build it having, you know, cosmic knowledge, having a knowledge of the planet, the dimensionality of the Earth to a crazy degree. Like, so if you take here's an easy statistic. If you take the height of the Great Pyramid, you multiply it by 42,200, you get the polar radius of the Earth. So
what does that mean, polar radius?
So from the center of the Earth to the North Pole, polar radius. If you take the perimeter length of the Great Pyramid, you measure around the perimeter of it, and you multiply that by 42,200, you get the equatorial circumference of the Earth. So the length of right of you know the equator.
What is this
So it's
43,200?
this gets into Randall Carlson territory. It's a 432